Chapter 576. Zhu Yanqiu never dreamed that the illiterate and rustic Zhu Su could become a nurse. This was even more fantastic than a dream. Zhu Yanqiu had a strange feeling in her heart. The person she disdained in her heart had changed without her knowing. Zhu Yanqiu looked for Ning Shu one ward after another. Finally, she found Ning Shu. Seeing Ning Shu holding a needle and skillfully injecting the patient, Zhu Yanqiu doubted whether this person was Zhu Su Enyang. In Zhu Yanqiu's heart, Zhu Su Enyang was a person who only knew how to do things. She would do whatever she was asked to do. Now, she could wear a white nurse's uniform and hold a needle. Zhu Yanqiu felt that she had been deceived. What did Zhu Su Enyang mean by being so sneaky? He had been robbed before and stayed in this hospital for so long. Zhu Su Enyang couldn't not know his existence. But she didn't tell him, so he had to ask Fang Feifei for medical expenses. Now, because of her, Fang Feifei seemed to want to break up with him. Zhu Su Enyang was really a troublemaker. After Ning Shu gave the patient an injection, he turned around with the tray and saw Zhu Yanqiu standing at the door. Zhu Yanqiu's face couldn't be darker. She was full of resentment, with a resentful and angry expression. Ning Shu didn't care about Zhu Yanqiu at all. He took the tray and left. He passed by Zhu Yanqiu expressionlessly and indifferently. Zhu Yanqiu was furious. She turned around and followed Ning Shu. She suppressed her anger and asked, "Zhu Su Enyang, shouldn't you say something to me?" "Say what?" Ning Shu didn't think there was anything to say between them. Zhu Yanqiu asked in a low voice, "Why didn't you tell me you were a nurse in this hospital?" "Oh, I'm a nurse here," Ning Shu said. Zhu Yanqiu's face turned blue because of Ning Shu's indifferent attitude. She asked with red eyes, "Zhu Su Enyang, what do you mean?" Zhu Yanqiu was very angry with Ning Shu's attitude. Shouldn't he say something to her? Zhu Yanqiu just wanted an apology, but what was his attitude now? What kind of attitude was that? He had asked her for money before, but she didn't give him any. Didn't nurses get paid? He was already in such a difficult situation, but Zhu Sunyang was indifferent, which made Zhu Yanqiu very dissatisfied. Ning Shu looked at Zhu Yanqiu. His expression was indignant, as if he had suffered a great grievance. Ning Shu felt uncomfortable. "What are you feeling wronged for? Didn't you say that you don't want us? Don't you have a girlfriend? If I leave you silently, what else do you want?" Ning Shu looked at Zhu Yanqiu sadly. "I've already left. I won't hinder you and your girlfriend. What else do you want me to do?" Ning Shu looked at the crowd around them and looked at Zhu Yanqiu with red eyes. "When mother left, I kept sending you telegrams, but you just refused to come back. You asked me for money, but I said I didn't have any money, so you got angry. Sell me. I really don't have any money. More and more people gathered around. Zhu Yanqiu listened to Ning Shu's words and her face turned red. The eyes of the people around made Zhu Yanqiu feel like a thorn. "Sun Yang, what are you talking about? You came to Shanghai without telling me. I was worried about you." Zhu Yanqiu reached out to take Ning Shu's hand. Obviously, she wanted to avoid the crowd, but Ning Shu avoided her hand. "Sun Yang, don't be willful." Zhu Yanqiu's tone was threatening. Ning Shu said sadly, "Yanqiu, I know I'm not as beautiful as your girlfriend, and I'm not as cultured as your girlfriend. You don't want me and the child anymore. You said you couldn't communicate with me, but you never talked to me properly. After mother passed away, we had no money. I sent you a telegram saying that I was going to Shanghai, but you didn't reply. I came to Shanghai and couldn't find you, so I could only sleep on the street with the child." Zhu Yanqiu's face and eyes were red. She looked at Ning Shu and couldn't say anything. She was so angry that her whole body was trembling. Zhu Yanqiu didn't expect Zhu Sunyang to have such courage. She didn't give him any face in front of the crowd and talked about him as if he was a beast. Did she want you to give up Fang Feifei? As long as there was something wrong with his head, he wouldn't choose Zhu Xunyang. What was Zhu Xunyang doing? Was she trying to ruin his reputation? Not only was she illiterate, but she was also vicious. Sure enough, people would change. Zhu Xunyang was not like this in the past. The collapse of the Zhu family made Zhu Xunyang have other thoughts. Xunyang, I didn't want to ask you for money. It's just that you didn't tell me that you took the child with you. I was worried. I thought something happened to you. Zhu Yanqiu's tone was full of concern. A smile suddenly appeared on Ning Shu's face and he said, I thought you were going to ask me for money again. Wait until I give you my salary this month. Just bear with it for a few more days. Zhu Yanqiu suddenly felt that the eyes around her were full of strong disdain. She said to Ning Shu, Sun Yang, I still have classes. I'll come to you tomorrow. Zhu Yanqiu left in a hurry. She looked a little embarrassed from the back. Nurse Zhu, is this your husband? Ning Shu, the head nurse in her 40s, asked, he looks good. How can he do that kind of thing? Ning Shu grinned and said, he is a person who has received a new education. He pursues free love and opposes the feudal arranged marriage. We are not on the same page. The new education made people abandon their wives and children. This man is not good. The head nurse said, but you are a legitimate wife. That kind of vixen is not legitimate. Ning Shu didn't say anything. According to the head nurse, she couldn't save this marriage. Ning Shu didn't want to. Why should she save it? Besides, she might not be able to save it. During this period of time, without Zhu Yanqiu, she still lived well with the child. She didn't have to serve a man and had to face his cold violence. Anyone could live well. Even if a woman didn't have a man, she could still live well. How could she be so lonely? She just wanted to find someone to rely on. Especially a man like Zhu Yanqiu, who couldn't be relied on at all. Instead, he would break her bones and suck her marrow. Zhu Yanqiu wouldn't share joys and sorrows with Zhu Xunyang. She would share joys and sorrows with Fang Feifei. In her heart, she didn't treat Zhu Xunyang as a person of the same class. She was very noble. Don't be too sad. Men are all like this. When they are young, they are dazzled by the colorful world. When they are older, they still have to return to their families. The head nurse comforted Ning Shu. Ning Shu took off her nurse uniform and planned to pick up Zhu Xiyuan from school. She wouldn't wait for the prodigal to turn over a new leaf. Besides, how could Zhu Yanqiu turn over a new leaf? Even if he did, she would kick him away. A prodigal was a prodigal. It was easy to change mountains and rivers, but hard to change one's nature. After picking up Zhu Xiyuan from school, Ning Shu took Zhu Xiyuan to a Western restaurant to eat steak. She spent all the money but didn't give it to Zhu Yanqiu. Chapter 577. Ning Shu was more worried about what would happen to Zhu Xiyuan if he went to the battlefield. Ning Shu pursed his lips and said, Xiyuan, Mom might go to the battlefield. Zhu Xiyuan put down the pencil in his hand and walked to Ning Shu. Zhu Xiyuan was much taller than before. She was about 5 or 6 years old and was almost at Ning Shu's heart. Besides, Zhu Xunyang was not tall to begin with. Mom, you will leave me, right? Zhu Xiyuan looked at Ning Shu. Ning Shu sighed and said, Mom has to go. Zhu Xiyuan lowered his head and sounded very disappointed. Mom, Xiyuan doesn't want to leave you. Ning Shu regretted talking about this topic. He didn't promise Zhu Xiyuan that he would never leave her. Zhu Xiyuan was unhappy for a few days and ignored Ning Shu. Ning Shu didn't say anything. Ning Shu could only accompany Zhu Xiyuan for a few years. Since Zhu Yanqiu knew that Ning Shu worked in the hospital, she went to the hospital to find Ning Shu when she didn't have class. However, her attitude towards Ning Shu was much better. It was probably because there were too many people in the hospital that he had some scruples. Zhu Yanqiu didn't want to be known as a heartless person. The intellectuals in this era paid more attention to reputation. Zhu Yanqiu still wanted to revitalize the Zhu family. Zhu Yanqiu's purpose was to ask Ning Shu for money to avoid the current crisis. She felt that Zhu Su Nyang was smarter than before. She didn't ask for money directly. She wanted to take Ning Shu and Zhu Xiyuan to live with her. Su Nyang, it's too much for you to raise the children alone. Live with me and let me take care of you, Zhu Yanqiu said gently to Ning Shu. When Ning Shu heard Zhu Yanqiu's words, she was dumbfounded. What did she mean? Ning Shu didn't think that Zhu Yanqiu was so kind to live with her and Zhu Xiyuan. She was so resistant before. That's not good. Will it affect your studies? Didn't you say that you were busy with your studies and couldn't take care of the children? Ning Shu said with a frown. It's fine. It's my duty to take care of you. Zhu Yanqiu said gently. Coupled with his handsome face and refined temperament of a rich young master, it was easy for him to give others a good impression. Ning Shu didn't agree, but he also understood Zhu Yanqiu's intentions. Once they were in Zhu Yanqiu's territory, Zhu Yanqiu could do whatever she wanted. At that time, she would be completely exploited by Zhu Yanqiu. In the hospital, Zhu Yanqiu didn't dare to be too ruthless. Being rejected by Ning Shu, Zhu Yanqiu was angry, but she said, Sun Yang, when are you going to stop being angry? Ning Shu pursed his lips. She made it sound as if she was being unreasonable. If I don't go, why don't you bite me? Zhu Yanqiu could only go to the hospital to look for Ning Shu every day. She said that she wanted to take care of Ning Shu and let Ning Shu live with her. She said that it was too dangerous for a woman to live with a child, especially now that the world was so chaotic. Ning Shu still refused, and he refused in a big way. Zhu Yanqiu was so angry that she hated Ning Shu even more. There was a reason why he was so anxious to get money, because Fang Feifei was ignoring him now. Since the matter was exposed, Fang Feifei hadn't said a word to him. Although she didn't mention breaking up with him, Zhu Yanqiu was very uneasy. Zhu Yanqiu now wanted to find a reason to talk to Fang Feifei. The best reason was to pay back the medical expenses that Fang Feifei had paid for him. But Zhu Yanqiu didn't have money, so she hoped to get it from Ning Shu. Zhu Yanqiu had never suffered since she was a child, so she didn't want to work to make money. So she could only start with Ning Shu and get money from Ning Shu. And she was a nurse now, so she should be rich. Besides, Zhu Yanqiu also suspected that Ning Shu had taken the Zhu family's money. At that time, his mother gave most of the money to him, so there was still some money left. Zhu Yanqiu thought that the money was with Ning Shu. Zhu Yanqiu had never been so embarrassed. She was so worried about money. He endured the danger of being hated by Fang Feifei and wanted to take the mother and son to live together, but she still didn't know what was good for her. But now Zhu Yanqiu could only endure it. She went to the hospital every day, no matter what weather it was, just to let Ning Shu see her sincerity and let Ning Shu live with her. Her attitude was very good, and she also said that she would protect Ning Shu and her son. Even the doctors and nurses in the hospital told Ning Shu not to be too tense and to be gentle when it was time. When the man was impatient, she would be the one to suffer. They told Ning Shu to live a good life with Zhu Yanqiu. Ning Shu could only laugh at this. These people only saw Zhu Yanqiu's gentleness, but they didn't see Zhu Yanqiu's evil intentions. Zhu Yanqiu only had Fang Feifei in his heart. Now he was so good to her just because he wanted her to take out the money. Ning Shu was so annoyed by Zhu Yanqiu that he didn't go to the hospital to work directly. He only went to learn military medical knowledge on the battlefield. If you like to wait in the hospital, then wait until you die. When Zhu Yanqiu arrived at the hospital, she was directly told that Ning Shu had resigned. Zhu Yanqiu's head suddenly went blank. She was so angry that she wanted to strangle that woman in her heart. She disappeared without a word again. In the vast sea of people, Zhu Yanqiu didn't know where to find her again. He still didn't know where Ning Shu lived. He had lowered himself to talk to that woman, but she was still so arrogant. Zhu Yanqiu was very anxious. He had no money. If he delayed it, he wouldn't even have food to eat, let alone return the money to Fang Feifei. He was afraid that Fang Feifei would break up with him. Zhu Sunyang was so hateful. Zhu Yanqiu left the hospital. He wanted to take a rickshaw back, but he had no money at all. Zhu Yanqiu was very poor now. Zhu Yanqiu looked at the bustling streets of Shanghai and the people coming and going. She suddenly felt helpless in her heart. No matter how Zhu Yanqiu looked down on Zhu Sunyang, he still relied on Zhu Sunyang in his heart. Because Zhu Sunyang tolerated him, he could treat Zhu Sunyang so unscrupulously. Because Zhu Sunyang would only tolerate him infinitely. Now without Zhu Sunyang, Zhu Yanqiu's heart was blank and scared. She had the same feeling as Mother Zhu at that time. She didn't want to face the outside world. But she let Zhu Sunyang serve them like a cow. Ning Shu's life was very comfortable. As for whether Zhu Yanqiu was alive or dead, she didn't want to care. In fact, Ning Shu felt a little uncomfortable in her heart. She wanted to end Zhu Yanqiu directly at that time, but Zhu Sunyang subconsciously resisted, which made the current situation neither good nor bad. The humble and cowardly Zhu Sunyang couldn't be blamed for being bitten by dogs. If a person didn't have a bottom line and principles, they would either live a very good life, or live without self like Zhu Sunyang. Ning Shu freed up more time to accompany Zhu Siyuan. She also prepared for the preliminary work of going to the battlefield, so that she wouldn't be in a mess on the battlefield. Ning Shu couldn't wait to be armed to the teeth to ensure her safety. Anything could happen on the battlefield. If something happened, her task would be a failure. Chapter 578. Zhu Siyuan poured a cup of tea for Ning Shu, who was grinding medicinal powder. The small man held the teapot and poured tea for Ning Shu. Ning Shu was shocked and quickly took the teapot. It was filled with hot water. If he could not hold it and it fell to the ground, it would break. The teapot was small, but it would be a big problem if he got scalded. Ning Shu placed the teapot on the table and said to Zhu Siyuan, "Thank you, Siyuan." Zhu Siyuan looked at the medicinal powder. Ning Shu asked, "Mother, are these things used to save people?" "Yes." Zhu Siyuan looked at Ning Shu and said, "Mother, send me to boarding school." Ning Shu was stunned. "What?" Zhu Siyuan said in a low voice, "I asked Mr. what a battlefield doctor was. Mr. said that it was a person who saved the lives of soldiers. I told Mr. that Mother was a battlefield doctor. Mr. admired Mother very much. I don't understand what Mr. means." Zhu Siyuan looked at Ning Shu. "Mother, go to the battlefield." Ning Shu looked at Zhu Siyuan strangely. Zhu Siyuan had not been happy a while ago, but now he had thought it through. He was so reasonable. It was not like Zhu Siyuan at all. "What's wrong with you?" Ning Shu looked at Zhu Siyuan. "Why did you suddenly become mature?" Zhu Siyuan said, "Mr. said that what Mother does is beneficial to the country and the people." Ning Shu didn't think that it was because he had suddenly thought things through. She reckoned that he had been praised by the teacher and no longer objected to Ning Shu going to the battlefield. She was afraid that when she really went to the battlefield, Zhu Siyuan would cry himself to death. "Mother, I'll go to boarding school," Zhu Siyuan said to Ning Shu. At this time, boarding schools already existed. The concept of boarding schools was proposed by the Song sisters. Ning Shu put down the work in his hand and asked Zhu Siyuan, is that really what you think? Mother went to the battlefield to save people and is alone. I don't even know when Mother will come back. Can Mother not go? Zhu Xiyuan tilted his head and asked. Of course not. Ning Shu patted Zhu Xiyuan's head. Mother has to go. Ning Shu felt that if he left, Zhu Xiyuan would definitely cry in the boarding school. Zhu Xiyuan. Ning Shu said, Mother, I realize that I have things that other students don't have. The things that other students have are better than mine. These were all bought for me by Mother. In the past, Mother suffered a lot. Now that you have these things, is it because Mother wants to go to the battlefield? Zhu Xiyuan had a lot of books and even a fountain pen, but the other students might not even have a cheap brush. Ning Shu looked at Zhu Xiyuan in surprise. He couldn't help but hug him and said, Xiyuan, in this world, you have to give something in order to get something. Mother wants to give Xiyuan a better life and become someone that Xiyuan can be proud of. The battlefield changed rapidly. Ning Shu didn't know when he would return from the battlefield. Ning Shu could only influence Zhu Xiyuan in a positive way. In the future, you can proudly tell others that your mother is a battlefield doctor who saves people. What about father? Zhu Xiyuan asked. Ning Shu was speechless for a moment. How should he answer? He thought about it and said, when the nation is in danger, perhaps your father will become a soldier. Ning Shu wasn't sure if Zhu Yanqiu would still join the army. Xiyuan, do you want to see your father? Mother will take you to see him. Ning Shu kept stopping Zhu Xiyuan from seeing Zhu Yanqiu. No matter how young a child was, he had his own judgment. Zhu Xiyuan nodded. Yes. Okay. Ning Shu put on a jacket, held Zhu Xiyuan's hand, and went out. They hailed a rickshaw and went to Zhu Yanqiu's school. Zhu Yanqiu's school environment was quite good. The students who came and went were all wearing Zhongshan suits. There were also female students wearing black leather shoes and pleated skirts in 2s and 3s. They were holding books in their hands and had their hair in braids, which made Ning Shu feel like she was in a different era. Because Ning Shu wasn't a student of the school, he could only wait for Zhu Yanqiu at the school gate. Zhu Yanqiu was notified by the reception office that someone was looking for him. Zhu Yanqiu immediately thought of Zhu Su. Zhu Yanqiu saw Ning Shu holding the child at the school gate. He was surprised and angry, but he suppressed his anger. He was afraid that she would run away. This time, he had to know her address no matter what. Su, you're here. Xiyuan is here too. Zhu Yanqiu's attitude was quite good. Ning Shu nodded and looked Zhu Yanqiu up and down. Zhu Yanqiu was much thinner than before. There was a heavy gloominess between his eyebrows. Obviously, he wasn't doing well. Knowing that you're not doing well, I feel much better. Xiyuan wants to come and see you, Ning Shu said calmly. It was this kind of indifferent attitude again. Zhu Yanqiu was so angry that his liver hurt. He left the hospital without saying anything. He couldn't find her at all. Shouldn't she explain to him? Zhu Yanqiu felt that the other party didn't take him seriously at all. Zhu Yanqiu sadly found that no matter how angry he was, he had to endure it. Moreover, he had to endure it for Zhu Su. How sad was that? Xiyuan, call Dad. Don't you want to see Dad? Ning Shu asked Zhu Xiyuan. There were people coming and going at the school gate now. Many students who passed by looked over when they heard this. Zhu Yanqiu's face immediately turned green. Father, Zhu Xiyuan called out in a crisp voice. Zhu Yanqiu glared at Ning Shu fiercely. This person was doing it on purpose. He wanted to spread the news that he had a family everywhere. Call uncle. Zhu Yanqiu deliberately raised his voice. Obviously, he said it for others to hear. Zhu Xiyuan was dumbfounded. He turned to look at Ning Shu. Ning Shu had a smile on his face. Zhu Yanqiu was really a coward. He was the most cowardly man she had ever seen. He was afraid of being laughed at and wanted to make them disappear from this world. Let's go home first. Zhu Yanqiu wanted to take Ning Shu and Zhu Siyuan back to where he lived. Ning Shu called for a rickshaw and said, Siyuan just wanted to see you. He's already seen you. We're going back. Zhu Yanqiu was irritated. She felt that these two people were just here to see monkeys. They would leave after seeing her. Sun Yang, don't be stubborn, okay? Can't we have a good talk? Zhu Yanqiu said very helplessly. I can explain about Fong Feifei. Ning Shu grinned. How else did this matter need to be explained? Ning Shu didn't want to hear it at all. He said to Zhu Siyuan, let's go back. Zhu Siyuan nodded and got on the rickshaw. Zhu Yanqiu quickly grabbed Ning Shu and asked, Sun Yang, where do you live? The apartment. Didn't I tell you before? I live in the apartment. Ning Shu shook off Zhu Yanqiu's hand and got on the rickshaw. Zhu Sun Yang, do you think of me as? Zhu Yanqiu looked around and said in a low voice, as your husband? Do you think of me as your wife? I'm not your sister. Ning Shu sneered. Chapter 579. Zhu Yanqiu never cared about Zhu Sunyang, but he asked Zhu Sunyang to obey him wholeheartedly, think about him, and work hard without complaint. Fuck off. Ning Shu directly let the rickshaw driver go. Zhu Yanqiu ran a long distance behind the rickshaw, and he was too tired to keep up. Ning Shu looked back at Zhu Yanqiu, who was bent over and panting with his hands on his knees. Ning Shu looked down on such a man very much. He was not worthy of being a son, husband, or father. Zhu Yanqiu was a spoiled person, and he was very embarrassed when he encountered something. Ning Shu wondered how such a person became successful in the end. Was it because of his halo? Mother, why did father ask me to call him uncle? Ning Shu asked Zhu Siyuan in confusion. Ning Shu said casually, because your father doesn't want people to know that you are his son. Why? Because he feels ashamed. Why does he feel ashamed? Because your mother has not received a new education. I don't understand, what is the relationship between these two? Yes, your father likes girls who receive a new education. You don't understand. Ning Shu received an order from above that she was going to follow the army. When she received this order, Ning Shu's heart was heavy. She glanced at Zhu Siyuan, who she was most worried about. After the September 18 incident, the fall of the three eastern provinces gave Japan a taste of the sweetness of the war to invade China. Using the method of war to support war, they solved the lack of economic resources, the small domestic market, the overpopulation, and the resulting domestic instability. Finally, on July 7, 1937, they launched a full-scale war to invade China that lasted for 8 years. Now, artillery fire was everywhere, and more troops were sent out. Ning Shu did not have much time. She only had 3 days to solve the problems at home. After 3 days, Ning Shu would follow the army. During this period, many people who wanted to save this race joined the army to fight against the invaders. Mom, send me to my boarding school, Zhu Siyuan Ning Shu said. I know Mom is leaving. Zhu Siyuan grew very quickly. Now, he was almost at Ning Shu's shoulder. Mother, Sir said that the Japanese invaded our land. Our compatriots should drive the Japanese invaders out of our land. Ning Shu felt strange every time he heard Zhu Siyuan shout such high-sounding slogans. Zhu Siyuan must have been brainwashed by his Mr. Nationalist. Ning Shu sent Zhu Siyuan to the boarding school and told the teacher that he was a military doctor and had received orders to follow the army. He hoped that he could help take care of the child. When the teacher heard this, he told Ning Shu not to worry and that he would take good care of Zhu Siyuan. When the country was in danger, everyone hoped that the land under their feet would be safe. Although not everyone dared to go to the battlefield, they were still willing to do something for the country. Ning Shu squatted down and hugged Zhu Xiyuan. He said, "Xiyuan, be good and wait for Mom to come back." Zhu Xiyuan wiped his tears on Ning Shu's body and said with a choked voice, "Xiyuan will wait for Mom." Ning Shu wiped his face and turned to leave. When he turned back, he saw that Zhu Xiyuan was holding the teacher's hand and waving at him. Now, Zhu Xiyuan was really like a little man. He was even more stalwart than Zhu Yanqiu. After sending Zhu Xiyuan to the boarding school, he went to find the interviewer and asked him to take care of his son. 3 days passed quickly. Ning Shu only took 2 pieces of underwear and then carried a large medical box to the military camp. The box was filled with medicinal powders made by Ning Shu. There were medicinal powders for stopping bleeding, preventing heatstroke and diarrhea, and some anti-inflammatory Western medicine. There were about 25 kilograms of medicinal powders in the box. Fortunately, Ning Shu had practiced peerless martial arts. In addition, he had been doing physical training, so it was not too difficult for him to carry the box. The 3 male field military doctors with Ning Shu were also assigned. Ning Shu did not know where they were assigned. Ning Shu's treatment was a little better than ordinary soldiers, but it was not much better. After a round of gunfire swearing, the army immediately went to the battlefield to stop the invaders and drive them out of their own country. Because Ning Shu was a military doctor, he could sit in the car and did not have to carry a medical box and follow the army. It was July, and the weather was very hot. The marching team was under the hot sun. Some soldiers could not stand it and got dehydrated. Ning Shu boiled a pot of water with a military pot and sprinkled medicinal powders for the soldiers who got heatstroke to drink. Ning Shu was glad that he had prepared everything in advance. Otherwise, he would have been numb at this time. As a military doctor, he was useless. He estimated that he would not live for long. If something happened, he would be abandoned. People who had no value were not worth the effort to save. The army was rushing day and night. Without enough vehicles, the soldiers could only run. They hurried to the battlefield. From afar, they could hear the sound of cannons and gunfire. There were fighter jets flying in the sky, and from time to time, they would throw down a lethal bomb. Ning Shu was arranged to be in a tent at the back of the battlefield. It was said that the previous field military doctor had died, and Ning Shu was to replace him. Ning Shu walked into the tent and saw that it was full of wounded people. Everyone's expression was abnormally painful. Some people were even rolling on the ground in pain, crying out in pain. It looked like they were about to die. Ning Shu quickly put down the medicine box and began to treat the wounded. Ning Shu was busy. After treating the wounded, he immediately treated the next one. It was Ning Shu's first time participating in a modern war. His ears were filled with the roar of cannons and the figures of fighter jets above. Bullets flew past his ears. One bullet could end a life. Ning Shu wrapped a piece of cloth tightly around a soldier's thigh. This soldier's calf had been blown away. The wound was bloody and there were white bones. Now, it was bleeding. The soldier's pupils had begun to dilate. It was obvious that he was not going to make it. He wrapped the thigh with a piece of cloth to prevent the blood from flowing too fast. Then, he sprinkled hemostatic powder on the wound. The soldier cried out in pain. Ning Shu gritted his teeth and treated the wound. In this situation, it was impossible to comfort the wounded. Every now and then, someone was carried in. Ning Shu took the lead to treat the seriously injured. Those who were not seriously injured waited. Ning Shu treated all kinds of wounds as if he was numb. He was tired, very tired, but his body could not stop. Ning Shu knew that being a field military doctor would be tough, but he did not expect it to be so tough. Moreover, he had to be on guard against the enemy's cannons. Every time a cannonball was dropped, Ning Shu felt that his ears were going deaf. The ground below shook violently. After the airdrop was over, Ning Shu got up from the ground and continued to treat the wounded soldiers. Ning Shu felt that his hands were useless. He did not know when he could stop. Chapter 580. The war didn't stop from the morning until the evening. There were more and more wounded people in the tent. Ning Shu was so busy that she didn't even drink a sip of water. She only managed to hold on by stuffing a fasting pill into her mouth. Ning Shu's ears were filled with the rumbling sounds of cannonballs. The enemy's fighter jets whistled in the air, causing the ground to shake from time to time. There were a few cannonballs that landed beside the tent. Ning Shu could even feel the heat waves from the cannonballs burning her skin, causing her skin to burn with pain. It was really too dangerous. Modern wars were more cruel. All kinds of weapons were more lethal. The damage and pain to the soldiers were greater. Why else would it be said that war pushed the development of human beings? Doctor, help take a look. A hurried female voice sounded. Her voice was filled with anxiety. Ning Shu found the voice familiar. He turned around and saw Fang Feifei in a military uniform with a camera hanging on her chest. Fang Feifei was supporting an injured person. Ning Shu looked at the soldier and grinned. It was Zhu Yanqiu. Zhu Yanqiu's shoulder was bleeding. Obviously, she was shot. He didn't expect the three of them to meet under such circumstances. Fang Feifei was stunned when she saw Ning Shu. She stuttered and asked, "You're a military doctor?" Ning Shu ignored her and was busy treating the soldier's wound. Fang Feifei didn't care about why this woman was here. She quickly said to Ning Shu, "Please take a look at Yanqiu." Yanqiu was shot. "Put him over there." "I'll be right there," Ning Shu said. "But he's badly injured. Can you take a look at him first?" Fang Feifei was frightened when she saw Zhu Yanqiu covered in blood. Ning Shu said without raising his head, "There are so many wounded people here. There are many who are more seriously injured than him. They are all waiting for treatment. I said, put him down and apply this powder to the wound to stop the bleeding." Seeing Ning Shu's cold face, Fang Feifei was a little speechless. She put Zhu Yanqiu on the simple operating table made of wooden planks, untied Zhu Yanqiu's clothes, and sprinkled the medicine powder that Ning Shu said on the wound. Zhu Yanqiu gasped in pain, and her body convulsed in pain. "Come and see what's going on." "What's going on?" Fang Feifei saw Zhu Yanqiu like this and hurriedly shouted to Ning Shu. Ning Shu tied a knot on the gauze and walked towards Zhu Yanqiu. "Hold him down. Don't let him move," Ning Shu and Fang Feifei said. "Oh." Fang Feifei was stunned for a moment and quickly held Zhu Yanqiu back. Ning Shu picked up the scalpel and cut open the wound a little. Then, he took out the bullet and the fragments with a screwdriver. Then, he sprinkled the powder and wrapped it with gauze. The whole process took more than 10 minutes. Zhu Yanqiu wailed in pain. The scalpel cut through the skin and the screwdriver stirred in the wound. Zhu Yanqiu was in so much pain that she didn't want to move. Fang Feifei finally held down Zhu Yanqiu, who was moving around. Seeing Ning Shu's vigorous movements, she said in disbelief, "Why don't you give him anesthesia?" Ning Shu glanced at Fang Feifei. "There is no such precious thing as anesthesia here. Every soldier is holding on like this." Ning Shu stuffed another anti-inflammatory medicine into Zhu Yanqiu's mouth. "Get him some water and take the medicine." Ning Shu gave a few words of advice before she went to treat the others. Fang Feifei glanced at Ning Shu, unscrewed the kettle and carefully fed water to Zhu Yanqiu, who was groaning in pain. Then, she stayed beside Zhu Yanqiu. Looking at the busy Ning Shu and the injured Zhu Yanqiu, she frowned. "Military doctor, come with me." A man in a military uniform came in with 2 medals hanging on his chest. He walked into the tent and looked around. When he saw Ning Shu, he immediately said, "Someone is injured. Come with me. Why don't you bring him here?" Ning Shu asked while his hands were busy. "Sir was shot. He has to command the whole battlefield and can't leave. If he leaves, it will be a great blow to the morale. Now, come with me." The man anxiously said to Ning Shu, "If there is no accident, we can hold the fort before dark, so sir can only hold on." Ning Shu said, "Oh." He put the medicine box on his shoulder and said to Fang Feifei, who was guarding Zhu Yanqiu, "Don't be idle. If these wounded people need water or something, help them. If new wounded people are sent in and there is a lot of bleeding, sprinkle this powder on the wound. Stop the bleeding first and wait for me to come back." Fang Feifei was stunned by Ning Shu's words. She took the powder from Ning Shu and was about to speak, but he had already left the tent. Ning Shu walked in the trench with his back bent. There were bullets raining in his ears. Ning Shu was almost hit by a flying bullet, so he quickly bent down even more. Bang! A soldier was shot and fell in front of Ning Shu. Ning Shu immediately squatted down to see if he could be saved. "Let's go." "What are you doing?" "Sir is still waiting." Ning Shu, the officer in front of him, roared. The sound of artillery shells was too loud. People couldn't hear him at all if they didn't speak loudly. Oh! She wanted to save the wounded as soon as she saw them, but her body reacted faster than her brain. It was a conditioned reflex. Ning Shu felt the soldier's pulse and found that he was already dead. Ning Shu quickly followed the military officer and saw a few people surrounding a person lying on a stretcher in the trench. The officer lying on the stretcher was about 30 or 40 years old. Because of excessive bleeding, his face was pale and even his lips were pale. He had already fallen into a coma. Ning Shu saw that the clothes around his chest were wet with blood. His heart should be injured. Ning Shu suddenly felt numb. It was not easy to save him. If he died, would she be killed by these officers? Ning Shu put down the first aid kit and unbuttoned the officer's clothes. He took a cotton ball and wiped the blood from the wound. There was a hole in his chest. Ning Shu's heart was cold. How could he save him? How is it? Hurry up and save him. Several officers looked at Ning Shu. For a moment, Ning Shu was under a lot of pressure. Ning Shu took a scalpel and cleaned the edge of the skin. He widened the wound and exposed the wound. Without anesthetics, the unconscious officer woke up from the pain and moved his body. The officers beside him quickly held him down. Ning Shu pulled open the necrotic tissue and saw the deformed bullet head stuck in the ribs. There were also some fragments scattered in the flesh. If these fragments were not taken out, they would cause lead poisoning. Ning Shu held a scalpel and slowly pried open the rib tissue. The senior officer was in so much pain that he gasped and opened his eyes. His face was full of pain and he was sweating profusely. Ning Shu took out the bullet with a suction cup in her right hand. Then, the wound started bleeding like a fountain. Ning Shu sprinkled some medicinal powder and quickly covered the wound with a cotton ball. When the bleeding stopped, Ning Shu cleaned up some of the fragments and covered the wound with a pad. Then, she bandaged the wound and fixed it. Ning Shu looked at the senior officer who was barely breathing and felt anxious. She dissolved the anti-inflammatory and anti-infection Western medicine in water and asked the officer to feed it to the senior officer. Chapter 581. After finishing these things, Ning Shu planned to go back. The officer who called Ning Shu said to Ning Shu, "You go back first. I'll call you when the officer has something to do." Okay. Ning Shu carried the medical kit and left. He walked in the trench like a cat. When he met an injured soldier, he immediately put down the medical kit to save him. When Ning Shu returned to the tent, she saw that Fang Feifei was running around in circles. Because she had never done these things before, she was flustered. When she saw that Ning Shu had returned, she let out a long sigh of relief. Ning Shu put down the medical kit and put on gloves. He asked Fang Feifei, whose wound is more serious? That one over there. He was shot twice. Fang Feifei pointed at a person on a wooden board. Ning Shu walked over and felt the pulse. It was very weak. There was also powder on the wound that Fang Feifei had scattered. Ning Shu took out silver needles and inserted 2 needles into the soldier's body. Then he began to treat the wound. Fang Feifei looked at Ning Shu in a daze. She felt that the person in front of her was not the illiterate Zhu Sunyang that Zhu Yanqiu said. How could he treat the wound so calmly, be the child bride that Zhu Yanqiu said didn't know anything? It was already dark. Ning Shu couldn't see when he was treating the wound. Besides, after a busy day, his eyes couldn't take it anymore. It was very strenuous to hold the scalpel and bend over. Bring me the lamp over there. I can't see, Ning Shu said to Fang Feifei, who was standing there. Oh, okay. Fang Feifei brought the oil lamp over and put it in front of Ning Shu. Ning Shu could barely see. The sound of artillery fire gradually decreased. The gunshots were not as intense as before. Ning Shu knew that today's battle was over. After suturing the wound, Ning Shu stretched and let out a long sigh. It was so tiring. After the battle ended, many more wounded were carried over. Ning Shu hastened the treatment. Because it was dark, Fang Feifei had been helping to hold the oil lamp. Fang Feifei's hand was sore, so she changed to the other hand. After a while, he finally treated the wound of the wounded. It was already dark outside. It was estimated to be 10 o'clock. After that, Ning Shu thanked Fang Feifei. Fang Feifei didn't say anything. She put down the oil lamp and stayed beside Zhu Yanqiu. Ning Shu moved his stiff neck. Finally, he could have a good rest. Ning Shu wiped his scalpels and scissors clean and put them in the medicine box. There was much less medicine powder in the medicine box. It was only the first day. It seemed that he had to use it sparingly. Ning Shu felt that he should ask for medical resources from the people above. She was a military doctor, but without anti-inflammatory medicine, Ning Shu couldn't save people no matter how capable he was. When it was time to eat, the cook sent some food over. The food was very simple. It was rice soup with pickled vegetables and cornbread. Ning Shu chewed the cornbread and drank the rice soup as clear as water when he couldn't swallow it. Fang Feifei couldn't eat these things. She put it down after one bite and took out chocolate from her pocket. Ning Shu saw Fang Feifei eating chocolate. At this time, chocolate was a very expensive Western candy. She was so rich. Zhu Yanqiu, who had been in a coma for almost half a day, finally woke up. When she opened her eyes, she was still a little dazed. She moved her body and took a breath in pain. Yanqiu, lie down first. Don't move. Fang Feifei quickly held Zhu Yanqiu and didn't let her get up. Feifei. Zhu Yanqiu saw Fang Feifei and smiled. Fang Feifei's tears fell down and she said with a sobbing voice, "You really scared me. I thought you wouldn't wake up." "I won't." Zhu Yanqiu grimaced in pain. Fang Feifei quickly put the rice soup in the bowl in front of Zhu Yanqiu's mouth and said, "Drink some water." Zhu Yanqiu enjoyed Fang Feifei's care. It seemed that even if she was injured, she was happy. Ning Shu chewed cornbread on the side and watched the two lovey-dovey. After eating the cornbread, Ning Shu began to check if these wounded people had a fever. A fever was also fatal. Ning Shu saw that many of these wounded people were disabled and didn't have much fighting power. They would probably be sent home by the army and compensated. Human life was the most worthless in troubled times. At least these people were still alive. Those who were hit in the vital parts and died on the spot were much better. Military doctor, come with me quickly. The officer has a fever, Ning Shu, the previous officer, said. Ning Shu put the medicine box on his shoulder and followed without saying a word. Zhu Yanqiu, who was drinking rice soup, only saw Ning Shu's back. Under the weak light, she couldn't see clearly. She asked Fang Feifei, "Is our military doctor a woman?" Fang Feifei's hand holding the bowl paused. She just nodded and didn't say anything. Ning Shu came to the officer's tent. The officer was sleeping on a simple wooden bed. His body was slender and his body was even longer than a wooden board. He walked over and touched his forehead. Then he looked at his wound. The gauze around the wound was oozing blood and he was sweating all over. Ning Shu quickly said, "Get some water and wipe his body." Ning Shu opened the medicine box, dissolved the Western medicine in water and fed it to the officer. A guard got some water for the officer to wipe his body. Ning Shu changed the gauze on the wound again. She had done everything she could. If he couldn't survive, Ning Shu felt helpless. "Where did you get these things in your box?" Ning Shu asked. Ning Shu said, "I prepared them myself. You go back first. If the officer needs anything, I'll call you again," Ning Shu said. "What's your name?" "Zhu Sunyang." Ning Shu put the medicine box on his shoulder. "Then I'll call you military Dr. Zhu." "I'm Tang Zheng," Ning Shu said. "Officer Tang." Ning Shu said politely. Then he said, "The army is short of medicine. Simple physical therapy can't save the soldiers' lives. Can you get some medical resources?" Tang Zheng spread his hands and said, "I can't give you an accurate answer. Let's wait until the officer wakes up. It's not just our army that's short of medicine. Everything else is the same." Ning Shu could only nod. During the war, not only were medical resources scarce, but food was also scarce. Ning Shu regretted not getting more medicine. She knew that medical resources would be scarce, but she didn't expect it to be so scarce. If she hadn't prepared anything in advance, she would have been numb in the face of such a situation. Even the cleverest housewife can't cook without rice. Carrying the medicine box back to the tent, Ning Shu felt dizzy. She had been busy the whole day and her brain hadn't rested at all. Ning Shu directly fell on the wooden plank and planned to take a nap. She didn't know what would happen tomorrow. Day after day of fierce battles, no one knew if they would still be alive tomorrow. How many comrades around them had fallen, and whether they would fall like their comrades in the next moment. People were greedy and vicious, plundering and tyrannical. In order to survive, they had to take up arms to resist. Chapter 582. Zhu Yanqiu saw that Ning Shu had come back, and then directly ignored him and lay down to sleep. Zhu Yanqiu was stunned. Who did he just see? Zhu Sunyang. Why was Zhu Sunyang here? She was a military doctor. When did Zhu Sunyang become a military doctor? Zhu Yanqiu was dazzled by this woman's change. She was a nurse before, and now she was a military doctor on the battlefield. He, her nominal husband, didn't even know about this. That is Zhu Sunyang, right? Zhu Yanqiu asked Fang Feifei uncertainly. Fang Feifei looked very bad. She fiddled with the camera in her hand and said, "It's your wife, Zhu Sunyang." Zhu Yanqiu quickly said, "I have never admitted that Zhu Sunyang is my wife. Don't be angry." Fang Feifei looked up at Zhu Yanqiu and said, "Zhu Sunyang has become a military doctor now, and maybe she came to the army for you. Aren't you touched?" Zhu Yanqiu shook his head and said, "I'm not touched. I'm touched that when I told you that I was going to the battlefield, you followed me to the battlefield without hesitation." "Zhu Sunyang has nothing to do with me," Zhu Yanqiu said expressionlessly. Zhu Yanqiu said expressionlessly. He remembered all the things that Zhu Sunyang had done to him. He didn't want to spend the rest of his life with such a person. Fang Feifei didn't believe it. Do you really think so? Don't you have a child? Speaking of the child, Zhu Yanqiu sighed. That child grew up with his mother. He doesn't have a father in his heart. He was influenced by Zhu Sunyang, so he has a grudge against me. Fang Feifei frowned and could only sigh. She said, I think Zhu Sunyang came to be a military doctor for you this time. She probably wants to reconcile with you. Absolutely impossible. It's impossible. I don't like Zhu Sunyang, Zhu Yanqiu said firmly. The next day, Ning Shu was awakened by a gunshot. With this gunshot, the sound of artillery fire rang out. The battle began again. Ning Shu drank a glass of water, stuffed a fasting pill into his mouth, put on gloves, and started a new day's work. Before any new wounded were brought in, Ning Shu checked the condition of the wounded. If they had a fever, he would give them medicine or change the gauze. Zhu Sunyang. Even if you followed me here, it's impossible for us. Zhu Yanqiu said to Ning Shu. Ning Shu was changing the gauze for the wounded person next to Zhu Yanqiu. When she heard this, she was stunned for a moment. Her face was full of confusion. Wasn't he feeling too good about himself? At this time, a wounded person was carried in. Ning Shu ignored Zhu Yanqiu and started treating the wounded person. This kind of disregard made Zhu Yanqiu so angry that his wound hurt. Zhu Yanqiu covered his wound. Seeing Ning Shu skillfully treating the soldier's wound, Zhu Yanqiu was a little confused. Was this still the Zhu Sunyang in his memory? Zhu Sunyang was cautious and submissive, like a wooden puppet. The way she spoke was also unpleasant. At first glance, one could tell that she didn't know much. So Zhu Yanqiu didn't like Zhu Sunyang so much. Even if the two of them consummated their marriage, it was probably because Zhu Yanqiu was in puberty. His hormones were restless and he had a strong attraction to the opposite sex. In addition, he could have consummated his marriage with Zhu Sunyang openly. Zhu Yanqiu ignored Zhu Sunyang, but this weed that he ignored actually bloomed a gorgeous flower now. Zhu Yanqiu was a little unhappy in his heart. He was lying here injured, but Zhu Sunyang was holding a scalpel and skillfully treating people's wounds. This change of identity made Zhu Yanqiu feel very uncomfortable. Moreover, he was saved by Zhu Sunyang. He felt ashamed in his heart. The reason why he joined the army was also because of Zhu Sunyang. On one hand, he wanted to make contributions on the battlefield. On the other hand, he wanted to get out of trouble. Because of Zhu Sunyang, he was gossiped about in school. So many classmates said that he was married and even had children. It was obviously the best time for a man, but he was already a husband and a father. Fang Feifei ignored him because of this. Moreover, he had no money on him. He didn't even have the money to rent a house and eat. Coincidentally, the war broke out at this time, so Zhu Yanqiu decided to join the army. Zhu Yanqiu went to see Fang Feifei and said that he was going to the battlefield. Maybe they wouldn't see each other again in this life. Zhu Yanqiu hugged Fang Feifei and said, I love you in this life. You will always be in my heart. Fang Feifei was held in Zhu Yanqiu's arms. She felt that Zhu Yanqiu's body was trembling. It seemed that Zhu Yanqiu was holding back all his feelings. At this moment, Fang Feifei felt Zhu Yanqiu's sincere feelings. Fang Feifei liked Zhu Yanqiu in her heart, but she was angry that Zhu Yanqiu lied to her. She felt as if she was a part of someone else's family. She was very uncomfortable in her heart. However, Fang Feifei was moved by Zhu Yanqiu's deep feelings. Thinking that Zhu Yanqiu was going to the battlefield, which was very dangerous, maybe they would be separated by life and death without her knowing. Thinking that she wouldn't be able to see Zhu Yanqiu in the future, Fang Feifei felt warm in her heart and made a decision. Rather than being separated, it was better to go to the battlefield together. At least they could still see each other. Zhu Yanqiu became a soldier, and Fang Feifei became a war reporter. The two went to the battlefield together. If nothing went wrong, the two would write a touching war song. However, Zhu Yanqiu felt that something was wrong when he went to the battlefield for the first time. There was something wrong with his index finger. When he pulled the trigger, he was very weak. Usually, he was fine, but when he aimed at the enemy and pulled the trigger, his index finger would tremble. He could barely pull the trigger with his index finger, but the hit rate was very low. He didn't know what was wrong with him. The old soldier next to him said that he was dizzy and wasn't suitable to hold a gun. Zhu Yanqiu felt very uncomfortable. He went to the battlefield to bring glory to his ancestors. Now, he couldn't kill the enemy with a gun. What was this? He still had to revitalize the Zhu family and give Fang Feifei a beautiful future. Going to the battlefield was Zhu Yanqiu's opportunity. Maybe he wanted to serve the country, but Zhu Yanqiu wanted to use this opportunity to succeed more. More importantly, Zhu Yanqiu didn't tell Fang Feifei that the Zhu family was no longer a big family. From the beginning to the end, Fang Feifei thought that Zhu Yanqiu was a young master of a big family. A young master of a big family was going to the battlefield to save the country, and it was because of her. This was enough to make this man stand tall in a woman's heart. To some extent, Zhu Yanqiu was a liar. He found all kinds of lies to get money from Zhu Sunyang. He hid from Fang Feifei that he had a family, a wife and a child, and he was dating Fang Feifei. He didn't reveal any clues from the beginning to the end. Even now, Zhu Yanqiu still hid something from Fang Feifei. Chapter 583. Zhu Yanqiu was afraid that Fang Feifei would leave him because of family conditions, so he wanted to fight for a future on the battlefield. Even if Fang Feifei knew the truth, she wouldn't leave him easily. Zhu Yanqiu lied to two women at the same time. He lied to Zhu Sunyang out of malice. He took money from Zhu Sunyang and lied to Fang Feifei out of kindness. He tried every means to keep Fang Feifei by his side because he loved Fang Feifei. But now he couldn't hold a gun. He was injured on the first day on the battlefield and was saved by Zhu Sunyang. Zhu Yanqiu felt complicated. He felt that God was really unfair. He didn't have any place to stand out. Even Zhu Sunyang, who didn't know anything, became a military doctor on the battlefield. Zhu Yanqiu was very angry. Zhu Sunyang was a member of the Zhu family and was raised by the Zhu family. After her parents died, Zhu Sunyang betrayed them and took away the Zhu family's money. Now she had a meteoric rise. She was simply a shameless woman. Ning Shu was treating the soldier's wounds when she felt a burning gaze. She turned around and saw Zhu Yanqiu staring at her with a very resentful gaze. Her eyes were red. Ning Shu snorted and continued with her work. Zhu Yanqiu was used to venting all her emotions on her. There were more and more wounded people and the front line was still retreating. It meant that the front line couldn't hold on anymore. The enemy's firepower was originally strong and their weapons were stronger than hers. Ning Shu's simple operating room was also retreating. When they retreated, there were still air forces shooting crazily from the sky. This land fell. Although many soldiers sacrificed their lives, they couldn't stop the invaders. Ning Shu felt how small an individual's strength was. Even if she was a mission enforcer, she couldn't stop the wheels of history. What Ning Shu wanted to do was to try her best to save as many people as she could. She didn't have the ability to turn the tide of the battle around with a flip of her hand. Ning Shu opened the box and saw that there wasn't much powder left, but there were more and more wounded people. Ning Shu was very anxious. If this continued, the powder would be gone sooner or later. She had to think of a way to tell the higher-ups. The higher-ups kept saying that resources were tight, but too many soldiers had died. It was her responsibility as a military doctor. Ning Shu had many things to worry about every day. As long as a soldier's heart did not stop beating, she had to do her best to save them. Ning Shu really wanted to have a helper by his side. He had to do everything by himself, and he also needed her to do some trivial things. Ning Shu told Tang Zheng that he could look for him if he needed anything. As long as it was something beneficial to the military, he would do his best to fight for it. Ning Shu told Tang Zheng that he needed an assistant to bandage the warrior's wounds. Not long after, Tang Zheng brought a young lady over. The young lady looked young, about 15 or 16 years old. Her name was Xiao Tong. Later, when Ning Shu became familiar with the girl, he found out that the girl had been raped by a Japanese devil. Moreover, it was not a Japanese devil. Fortunately, she was saved by someone. Ning Shu taught the little girl how to wrap the bandage. She taught the little girl some basic knowledge, so Xiao Tong usually called Ning Shu master. Ning Shu saw her like this and taught her everything he knew. Now was the time when the country was in trouble. Even if one person's strength was small, it was still huge when accumulated. With a helper, Ning Shu's work was much easier. Some trivial things were left to Xiao Tong to handle. During this time, Fang Feifei was already a slightly famous war reporter. Many newspapers used her photos of the battlefield. However, Zhu Yanqiu did not have much progress. Because she was injured, she had to recuperate for a long time. Every day, she looked at Ning Shu's busy face. When she heard the people in the military call Ning Shu military Dr. Zhu and seemed to respect her, Zhu Yanqiu felt as if there were countless ants gnawing at her heart. He really wanted to tell these people that this woman was not worthy of respect at all. She was just a woman who had been sold as a servant since she was young. From the beginning to the end, this woman ignored him and treated him as heir. Fang Feifei was busy taking photos every day. She only came to take care of him after the war was over. When Zhu Yanqiu saw Ning Shu, he was anxious. When he saw Fang Feifei, he was also anxious. Because Fang Feifei had already left in front of him. He had nothing now and was afraid that Fang Feifei would leave him. However, he was injured. Zhu Yanqiu pursed his lips and made up his mind to go to the battlefield. If this continued, Zhu Sunyang would be more capable than him. Fang Feifei came back with a camera and asked Zhu Yanqiu, who looked gloomy, "Does the wound still hurt?" Zhu Yanqiu put away the loneliness on her face and reached out to wipe Fang Feifei's face. Her face was covered with dirt. She said, "It's good that you're okay. I'm worried about you all the time." "I'm fine." Fang Feifei gathered the camera and said, "I took a lot of photos again. These photos are evidence of the invaders invading our country." A smile appeared on Zhu Yanqiu's face. "Feifei, you're great." Fang Feifei smiled sweetly at Zhu Yanqiu and then glanced at Ning Shu, who was busy treating the soldier's wound. Fang Feifei's eyes flashed when she saw him treating the soldier's wound and telling Xiao Tong what to do with a solemn expression. Ning Shu basically had to work until midnight with the help of Xiao Tong. Xiao Tong was a quiet child. Perhaps it was because she had suffered a serious injury at a young age that made her feel inferior. She was very active in doing things. Usually, she would pour tea for Ning Shu. Ning Shu had fasting pills himself. If he was really hungry, he would eat fasting pills and give half of his food to Xiao Tong. A military doctor was a job that required a lot of physical strength. If one did not have enough physical strength, it would not work. Ning Shu's actions made Zhu Yanqiu so angry that she wanted to die. He was Zhu Su Nyang's husband. Although he couldn't be considered her husband, he should at least be her eldest young master. Ning Shu usually ignored him and didn't give him anything to eat. She treated an outsider better than him. Zhu Yanqiu wanted to get angry at Ning Shu, but considering his own body, he still needed Ning Shu to take care of his wound. No one could offend a doctor. No one could guarantee that they would not be injured on the battlefield. Ning Shu saw Zhu Yanqiu looking at him with red eyes and a constipated expression. Ning Shu was speechless. He turned around and said to Xiao Tong, "Sleep for a while. There are more things to do tomorrow." Xiao Tong nodded. Ning Shu asked, "Master, do you want me to get some water for you to wash?" Ning Shu waved his hand. "Rest. You don't have to do these things." In this situation, how could she care about whether her body was clean or not? Ning Shu could even smell the sweat on her body. She only needed to ensure that her hands were clean. She just had to endure the rest. Chapter 584. After a busy day, Ning Shu planned to rest. Fang Feifei came over and said to Ning Shu, "Zhu. Dr. Zhu, I have something to say to you. Can we talk outside?" Ning Shu refused. "Sorry, I feel very tired. I want to rest. Every day was hard." Why did they talk in the middle of the night instead of resting? Ning Shu said that he didn't have the time. Fang Feifei looked a little bad and said, "It won't take up much of your time. Let's talk about it and everyone will feel comfortable. I want to talk about Zhu Yanqiu." Ning Shu rubbed his eyebrows, got up from the wooden board and walked out of the tent with Fang Feifei. It was already late at night and the sky was full of bright stars. There were footsteps not far away. Obviously, soldiers were patrolling. Ning Shu didn't mind being dirty. He sat directly on the ground, supported his chin with his hand and asked, "What do you want to say?" Fang Feifei sat next to Ning Shu and said directly, "I won't give up on Yanqiu. We have the same ambition. We can talk about any topic. It's not easy to meet such a person in one's life. I know Zhu Yanqiu was your husband before, but you two didn't get along." Ning Shu was speechless. "So, why are you talking to me about this?" Ning Shu looked at Fang Feifei and said, "No matter what, he is already married. He has a wife and a child. You intellectuals are so funny. You said that you accepted the new ideas and wanted free love. It's just a marriage without a matchmaker. What do you mean by releasing human nature? As long as it's love, there will be a legitimate name." Women in this era had no guarantee at all. At least in ancient times, the patriarchal ethics attached great importance to marriage. Marriage was the foundation of etiquette. There was also the three no's on the surface. Fang Feifei's face was a little dark and said, "What kind of old-fashioned thinking is this? Times are different now. Everyone has the right to pursue their own happiness. It's impossible for Dr. Zhu to tie Zhu Yanqiu up with a child. Once the child grows up, he will have his own life. But what about the parents? Will they force the two to be together for the sake of the child? A person's life is very long. Spending decades with someone you don't like is a waste of your own life. This is irresponsible for your own life. What's the point of having to spend your whole life with someone you can't communicate with?" Ning Shu was speechless. It made sense. Ning Shu found that he couldn't refute it at all. But the root of the problem was that Zhu Yanqiu didn't even recognize his wife and son. He only knew how to exploit Zhu Su and Yang. Even if they had to separate, Zhu Yanqiu had to compensate Zhu Su and Yang. Otherwise, no one would have a good life. You two love each other sweetly, and in the end, you'll be successful and famous. You'll stand at the top and be admired by others. What's Zhu Su Yang's sacrifice worth? There was nothing in this world that could be taken for granted. What right did Zhu Yanqiu have to think that Zhu Su Yang should do something for him? He didn't even say thank you, and even despised Zhu Su Yang. Since that was the case, he should have tightened his belt back then. Zhu Yanqiu was a willful young master. "So, why are you telling me this? Are you telling me that you two are going to be together?" Ning Shu was expressionless and yawned. "If you want to tell me such meaningless things, then don't say it. If you two are going to be together, or if you two want to get married and have children, I have no opinion. Zhu Yanqiu is a gift to you." Ning Shu got up from the ground, patted the soil on his butt, and brushed past Fang Feifei. Fang Feifei turned around and looked at Ning Shu's back. She said, Zhu Yanqiu is not a thing. He's a human. He has his own feelings and thoughts. He doesn't need you to give in to him. Ning Shu waved his hand without looking back and walked into the tent. Seeing that Xiaotong hadn't rested yet and was waiting for him, Ning Shu said to her, "Go to sleep. Your body won't be able to take it." Ning Shu lay on the wooden board, closed his eyes and fell asleep. He was really speechless. What time was it now? Why was she still thinking about such things? People on the battlefield might not even be able to see the sun tomorrow. It was meaningless to think about love. When Zhu Yanqiu woke up, she saw Ning Shu coming in from outside the tent, followed by Fang Feifei. Zhu Yanqiu's heart skipped a beat. She quickly asked Fang Feifei, "Feifei, did Zhu Sunyang make trouble for you?" Fang Feifei shook her head and said, "Only now do I know what kind of person Zhu Sunyang is. She's very old-fashioned. No wonder you can't get along with her. You even said that we're a matchless couple." Zhu Yanqiu breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Don't worry about her. She's a woman from the feudal era. Even if you talk to her, it won't make sense. It's a waste of energy to talk to her. Feifei, I plan to go to the battlefield. But what about your injury?" Fang Feifei looked at Zhu Yanqiu's shoulder and said, "Don't worry. Your health is more important. Take care of yourself first." Zhu Yanqiu immediately said, "My injury is almost healed. I'm always doing nothing and wasting the army's food." Zhu Yanqiu was anxious. He couldn't delay any longer. The people who went to the battlefield with him had killed many enemies, but he had to lie here half dead. Fang Feifei nodded, "It's good that you know. But the battlefield is very dangerous. You must protect yourself well." When the war started, Zhu Yanqiu endured the injury on his body and fought. Zhu Yanqiu was eager for quick success and instant benefits. Even Zhu Sunyang, who he looked down on, had become a military doctor respected by the soldiers. He didn't have any merits. How could he talk about revitalizing the Zhu family and giving Fang Feifei happiness? Zhu Yanqiu had a lot of anger in his heart. He was determined to make a name for himself. But when he crawled in the trench, held the gun and pulled the trigger, Zhu Yanqiu had no ambition in his heart. He was full of powerlessness and fear. Zhu Yanqiu didn't know what was wrong with his hand. When he pulled the trigger, he was always powerless. There was a slight tremor and a little stiffness. He just felt that his hand didn't listen to his command. He felt that his fingers couldn't react accurately and quickly. In the face of this situation, Zhu Yanqiu, a big man, directly had red eyes. What was going on? What was wrong with his hand? Ning Shu was busy treating the wounds of the wounded. He saw Zhu Yanqiu, who had just gone to the battlefield, being carried back. He didn't have any injuries on his body. He was just stunned by the shell. However, the wound on his shoulder was torn again. He was bleeding and his clothes were wet. Ning Shu sprinkled some powder on Zhu Yanqiu's old wound. The severe pain of the wound woke Zhu Yanqiu up. He opened his eyes and the hazy face in front of him gradually became clear. Seeing that it was Ning Shu, Zhu Yanqiu suddenly reached out and grabbed Ning Shu's hand. Her voice was almost coming out from between her teeth. It was gloomy and angry. "You must have done something to me. You must have." Chapter 585. Zhu Yanqiu felt that his hand couldn't move. Zhu Sunyang must have done something to it when he was injured. Otherwise, his hand wouldn't be so trembling and stiff. "Zhu Sunyang, you have to be responsible." Zhu Yanqiu grabbed Ning Shu's arm tightly and didn't let Ning Shu go. Ning Shu was confused and impatient. "What's wrong with your hand? Isn't your hand fine? Why are you grabbing my arm like a ghost?" It's not broken or lame. What's wrong with you? Ning Shu pulled Zhu Yanqiu's hand away and went to work. I can't shoot with my hand. Zhu Yanqiu roared at Ning Shu and raised his hand. You must have done something to me. Ning Shu looked at him as if he was crazy. Zhu Yanqiu, are you okay? Your hand is fine. Why do you have to say that there's something wrong with your hand? It's not that there's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with your brain. Zhu Yanqiu looked very decadent and lay on the wooden board. I can't think of anyone who can make me like this except you. You fainted and you blame it on me. Zhu Yanqiu, can you be more cowardly? Ning Shu looked disdainful. It's okay that you can't support your family, but now you blame it on me. Is this showing your ability? He was pushing all the blame to her. She couldn't be the scapegoat. Shut up, Zhu Sunyang, shut up. Zhu Yanqiu was afraid that Ning Shu would say their relationship, so he roared at Ning Shu with a ferocious look. Now everyone on the battlefield knew that he and Fang Feifei were a couple and were college sweethearts. If others knew his relationship with Zhu Sunyang, how could he stay here? Zhu Yanqiu hated being involved with Zhu Sunyang. Ning Shu, bastard. At this time, Fang Feifei hurried in and asked Zhu Yanqiu, Yanqiu, are you okay? Zhu Yanqiu said to Fang Feifei very decadently, Feifei, I can't shoot. My hand can't shoot. Fang Feifei covered her mouth in shock and hurriedly asked, what's going on? What's wrong with your hand? Why can't you hold a gun? What's going on? Tell me. Fang Feifei was very worried about Zhu Yanqiu. Zhu Yanqiu turned to look at Ning Shu. Ning Shu shrugged. It's useless to look at me. What can I do to you? When you were injured, Fang Feifei was beside you. What can I do to you? Don't blame me. I can't take responsibility. Ning Shu ignored the two of them and started to treat the injured. While Xiaotong was assisting Ning Shu, she asked Ning Shu, Master, are you all right? Ning Shu turned his head and saw Xiaotong looking at him with a worried expression. He shook his head and said, it's fine. You don't have to care about that kind of person. Zhu Yanqiu might not know that she was the one who did it. She was just feeling depressed and wanted to find someone to vent. She just happened to be this person. Ning Shu laughed in his heart. Compared to the busy Ning Shu, Zhu Yanqiu and Fang Feifei were very worried. Fang Feifei even came to Ning Shu in private and asked Ning Shu if there was any way to treat Zhu Yanqiu's hand. Ning Shu twitched the corner of his mouth and said calmly, there's nothing wrong with his hand. He just fainted from being shot. It's the same as fainting from height. It's a psychological problem. It has nothing to do with the hand. I'm just a military doctor. I don't have the ability to treat any disease. Fang Feifei frowned and asked, is there really no way? This is related to Yanqiu's future. Besides, now is the time when the nation is in danger. One person is a little bit of strength. If Yanqiu can pick up a gun to kill the enemy and stop the invaders, military Dr. Zhu, I'll be thick-skinned and call you sister. At this time, we should put down our personal grudges. In the face of right and wrong, when the nation is in trouble, we can put our personal grudges aside. Ning Shu was speechless. Ning Shu was very impatient. Fang Feifei always stood at the top of morality and asked her for righteousness. It was as if she was the only one who had read books and the others were ignorant. She just wanted her to treat Zhu Yanqiu's hand. If it were someone else, Fang Feifei would not care at all. There were so many people in the team. It didn't make a difference whether Zhu Yanqiu was there or not. Ning Shu said calmly, how can I explain it to you so that you can understand? I said that there's nothing wrong with his hand. It's his psychological problem. He's afraid of being shot, fainted and can't be treated no matter what. Instead of asking me here, you might as well ask Zhu Yanqiu to overcome his psychological barrier. Otherwise, he won't be able to pick up a gun in his life. Fang Feifei frowned. Since the other party had said so, she could not say anything more. However, Zhu Yanqiu did not think that he had some psychological problem. He was not fainted, but his fingers. When he did delicate movements or things that required a high degree of concentration, his hands became stiff. However, the soldiers around him all said that he was fainted. Even Fang Feifei said that he was fainted. Zhu Yanqiu did not believe it and insisted on picking up a gun to take a look. However, the result was the same. Zhu Yanqiu was naturally not allowed to go to the battlefield in such a situation. Not only was his own safety not guaranteed, but he could also implicate other people. He was sent to deal with logistics by the higher-ups and became a cook. The job of a cook was much safer than fending off the enemies in the front. However, Zhu Yanqiu was not satisfied. He was a college student who had received a new education. Now that he wanted to be a cook, he could not get over the mental barrier. Of all things, only studying was the best. He was a scholar. A gentleman should stay away from the kitchen. Zhu Yanqiu would rather crawl in the trenches and risk dying in battle. She would rather die in battle than stay in the kitchen with a spoon in her hand and be burnt by smoke. What was the point of being a cook? Zhu Yanqiu wanted to bring glory to his ancestors. Ning Shu saw Zhu Yanqiu wearing an apron and bringing food with a dark face. Ning Shu laughed in his heart. He did not show it on his face. However, Zhu Yanqiu brought her very little food. Obviously, he was taking revenge on her. Zhu Yanqiu sneered at Ning Shu and then walked away proudly. Ning Shu pursed her lips. How shameless! Master, why don't you eat mine? Xiaotong sent her share to Ning Shu. Ning Shu waved his hand. You keep it. You don't have to give it to me. I have enough. Ning Shu ate pickled vegetables and cornbread. He sighed in his heart that the gap between people was so big. Zhu Yanqiu fried an egg for Fang Feifei and tried to find a way to give Fang Feifei something to eat. However, when it came to her, she still wanted to deduct her rations. Dr. Zhu, I want to talk to you. Fang Feifei walked into the tent and said to Ning Shu. Her tone was not very good. At this moment, the sharp sound of the Air Force dropping bombs sounded in the sky. Ning Shu immediately shouted, "Get down." Then, he pressed Xiaotong down. Fang Feifei also crawled on the ground the moment Ning Shu told her to get down. As a war reporter, she ran around the battlefield every day to take photos. She had to protect herself. Boom! The bomb landed on the ground. Even if Ning Shu covered his ears, he instantly felt that his ears could not hear. His heart was hurt by the huge sound waves. Chapter 586. A few more cannonballs landed one after another, causing the earth to shake. The simple tents were overturned by the huge heat wave. Some of the wounded in the tents were directly killed by the cannonballs that landed nearby. Ning Shu raised her head and looked at the dead wounded. These were the people she had spent a lot of effort to save. With one cannonball, all her efforts were in vain. The Air Force hovered in the sky for a while and then roared away. Although Ning Kong's bomb was not very accurate, it could cause damage to buildings and targets. All kinds of heat radiation and radiation were also a kind of huge damage to the human body. Ning Shu shook her head. She felt that her ears were buzzing. She could not hear the people around her clearly. This symptom would last for a while. The tent was still damaged. Many of the wounded were injured. Tang Zheng came over with a group of soldiers to check the situation. When he saw Ning Shu, he asked, "Dr. Zhu, are you okay?" Ning Shu could not hear. She picked her ears and said to Tang Zheng, "Some of the wounded are stable. Send them back. It's too dangerous here." "Okay, the officer is looking for you." The gauze on the officer's wound needs to be changed, Tang Zheng said loudly to Ning Shu. Ning Shu could barely hear it. She indicated that she understood and treated the wounds of the people who were injured by the bombs first. Fang Feifei, Feifei. Zhu Yanqiu hurried over. When she saw Fang Feifei sitting on the ground, she quickly went over to help her up and asked, Feifei, are you okay? Fang Feifei was a little confused. When she saw Zhu Yanqiu, her eyes turned red. She could not help but hug Zhu Yanqiu. Zhu Yanqiu comforted her, it's okay, it's okay. Tang Zheng ordered the soldiers to carry the wounded away and was ready to send them back. Ning Shu's eyes turned and said to Tang Zheng, are you going back to Shanghai? I want to write a letter. Can you help me send it back? Tang Zheng nodded, okay. Ning Shu quickly finished her work. Then she felt a little embarrassed. She did not have a letter paper or a pen. Tang Zheng gave Ning Shu a pen and took the letter from the guard next to him. Ning Shu. Thank you, Officer Tang. Ning Shu took the letter and wiped the dust off the wooden board. He placed the letter on the wooden board and began to think about how to write to Zhu Xiyuan. In the letter, Ning Shu mentioned that she was very busy and had saved many people. She told Zhu Xiyuan that she was protecting the country no matter how much pain these soldiers had suffered. She also told Zhu Xiyuan not to worry about her. After she finished writing the letter, Ning Shu felt as though she had been cut off from the world for a lifetime. She had been saving people at the front lines all day, and after she woke up, she would save people. She had no idea how much time had passed. Ning Shu didn't even know what day it was today, nor did she know how Zhu Xiyuan was doing. After handing the letter to Tang Zheng, Ning Shu said, thank you, Officer Tang. Tang Zheng put away the letter. Ning Shu said, haven't you applied for the medical resources yet? I can't hold on any longer. Why don't you get me some Chinese medicine? I'll make the medicine myself. Ning Shu had no medicine powder in his medicine box. If it wasn't for the medicine powder that could stop bleeding, some people would die from excessive blood loss. There would be no time to save them. In this era where blood transfusion was not allowed and there were no conditions for blood transfusion, those who couldn't stop bleeding could only wait for death. Ning Shu didn't wait for Tang Zheng to answer. He took the paper from the guard's hand and wrote the name of the Chinese medicine on it. He said, I want these Chinese medicine. This medicine powder can stop bleeding. Without the medicine now, I can't save people. Tang Zheng could only nod and let Ning Shu change the gauze for the officer. Then he went to do his work. Zhu Sunyang, you're good. Now you've got the upper hand. I didn't know you had this ability before. Zhu Yanqiu looked at Ning Shu talking to Tang Zheng and his heart was burning. He was just a small fry now, but Zhu Sunyang could talk to Tang Zheng. Who was Tang Zheng? He was the person next to the highest commander of this army. Ning Shu turned his head and saw Zhu Yanqiu supporting Fang Feifei. He looked at him with disdain, and his tone was sour as if he had drunk 2 bottles of vinegar. Seeing Ning Shu staring at him, Zhu Yanqiu said sarcastically, as a military doctor, you have this ability. Flirting with men and not following the rules of a wife. Zhu Yanqiu saw that the woman he looked down on was doing better than him. A person who didn't know anything couldn't change her humble past. A woman who was sold as a servant. At this time, Zhu Yanqiu completely forgot the new ideas he had accepted. Equality, freedom, and universal love were all nonsense. Ning Shu looked at Zhu Yanqiu coldly. Did you eat shit? Is your mouth full of shit? I'm not following the rules of a wife. Tell me who my husband is. Ning Shu looked at Zhu Yanqiu with disdain. If you have the ability, tell me who my husband is. You. Zhu Yanqiu looked left and right. In the end, she didn't dare to say her relationship with Ning Shu. Humph, look at her cowardly and incompetent appearance. She has no guts. Facing Ning Shu's disdainful eyes, Zhu Yanqiu was angry. She gritted her teeth and didn't say anything. Ning Shu didn't bother to pay attention to Zhu Yanqiu. He treated the wounded and told Xiaotong. Then he carried the medicine box and went to change the gauze for the officer. Ning Shu felt that the officer of this army was very powerful. He was only in his 30s, but he could lead the army to fight against the enemy. At least Zhu Yanqiu didn't have such achievements at this age. This officer might have someone behind him, or he had a proud background. Ning Shu walked into the room with the medicine box. He saw that the officer was looking at a map. His face didn't look good. He was weak and pale because of a serious illness. Ning Shu stood at attention and saluted to the officer. "Officer." The officer nodded and said, "I heard from Tang Jing that you saved me." Ning Shu nodded. She was the one who saved him. Ning Shu asked the officer to take off his clothes and remove the gauze. He treated the suppuration of the wound and rebandaged it. Then he put away the blood-stained gauze and brought it back. "Can this kind of gauze still be used?" The officer asked when he saw Ning Shu put away the gauze. "Of course. It can be used after washing it and exposing it to the sun. These things are not enough, so they can only be used repeatedly," Ning Shu said. He could only try his best to find a way when resources were scarce. The wound couldn't be bandaged without gauze. The officer sighed. "You are good. Although you are a woman, I heard from Tang Jing that you saved a lot of people. When the war is over, I will give you a third-class military merit." "Thank you, officer." Ning Shu immediately saluted and shouted. She accepted the honor with a clear conscience. It was what she deserved. With the military merit, Zhu Sunyang's life would be better in the future. Ning Shu didn't know how long she could stay in this world. Zhu Sunyang's character was a little weak. She didn't know if she could become a qualified military doctor. It wasn't that difficult to be strong and live for herself. Even if it was for Zhu Siyuan, she should be brave and become a mother that Zhu Siyuan could be proud of. Zhu Siyuan was proud of his mother now. Chapter 587. A few days later, Tang Zheng came over to give Ning Shu a letter and some Chinese herbs. Ning Shu opened the letter. It was a letter from Zhu Siyuan. It was filled with worry and pride for Ning Shu. He said that he had shown the letter to his teacher and classmates. They were all praising his mother for being a great hero. In the end, he asked Ning Shu to take good care of him. He said that he would grow up quickly and fight the Japanese on the battlefield. When Ning Shu saw the letter, he felt that Zhu Siyuan had grown up a lot. Ning Shu kept the letter and started to process the Chinese herbs. He told Xiaotong how to process them. Now, Ning Shu and Xiaotong had another task, which was to process the herbs. They had less time to sleep. Ning Shu would let Xiaotong rest. She had cultivated peerless martial arts, so her body could take it. However, the little girl Xiaotong could not take it. Fortunately, with the support of the Chinese herbs, Ning Shu and Xiaotong's treatment process became more relaxed. Tang Zheng found Ning Shu and said that he wanted to mass-produce the prescription in Ning Shu's hands. This time, Tang Zheng went back and found out that the other troops had suffered heavy losses. Many of the wounded died before they could be treated. Although human lives were worthless in troubled times, the death count was still shocking. There were too many soldiers who died, and it was a blow to the morale of the entire country. Tang Zheng had long noticed the medicinal powder used by the military doctor. It seemed to be very effective. In this time of shortage of fast-acting Western medicine, it was good to use the traditional Chinese medicine passed down by their ancestors. Moreover, there were many Chinese herbs. Ning Shu had all kinds of thoughts in his mind. He asked, "Whose idea is this?" "I've reported this situation to the commanding officer." The commanding officer said that if you can contribute this prescription, he'll award you a second-class merit. Tang Zheng looked at Ning Shu. You're now worth more than a company commander. It was a good deal to exchange such a prescription for a second-class military merit, but Ning Shu had another idea in mind. He said to Tang Zheng, sure, but I have another condition. I want to apply for a patent for this prescription. This prescription can only belong to me. No one else can steal it. This prescription was nothing much, especially in this kind of situation. It was fine to take it out, but it needed a name. Applying for a patent could make Zhu Sunyang famous. In the future, patents would be money in peacetime. Patent? Tang Zheng didn't quite understand. Ning Shu explained, this thing can only be mine. Although I've given it away, I still have the right to possess the prescription. Tang Zheng thought for a moment, then looked at Ning Shu's face and said, you still haven't offered the prescription. Officer Tang, everyone wants a good reputation. I've given you the prescription, but it still belongs to me in name. In fact, it's not up to you to decide. Ning Shu said with a smile. Tang Zheng shook his head. I have to report this to my superior. Ning Shu nodded. Master, the superior wants to award you with a second-class military merit. Xiao Tong looked at Ning Shu with eyes full of admiration and admiration. Master, you're amazing. Ning Shu grinned. Whether this matter would succeed or not was still a problem. Ning Shu looked at Xiao Tong. You can also become a military doctor in the future. Xiao Tong's face turned red, but she immediately thought of something and her expression turned gloomy. Ning Shu saw her expression and knew that she was thinking of her tragic experience. You can definitely become a good military doctor. Ning Shu told Xiao Tong about his story. He said that he was abandoned by his husband and raised his child by himself. In order to survive, he joined the military doctor training in the field. Xiao Tong listened to Ning Shu's words and asked with her eyes wide open, what about the child's father? Didn't I say that he abandoned his wife and child? It's not a big deal. Ning Shu said casually. Master, you're really open-minded. Xiao Tong was much closer to Ning Shu. They were both women who had been hurt. So what if he couldn't accept it? Even if he was in an adverse situation, he could still fight back. Even if he died, he had to die meaningfully and drag someone down with him. I'm already so fucking miserable, the person who hurt me must be even more miserable. Tang Zheng told Ning Shu that the superior agreed to Ning Shu's request and found a time to personally award the medal to Ning Shu. Ning Shu was relieved. At least he fought for his rights. Even if the superior wanted to snatch it away, Ning Shu could not do anything. This was the best situation in the end. The superior dragged his injured body and put the medal on Ning Shu. He even gave a statement to Ning Shu, saying that the powder was still under Ning Shu's name. Ning Shu looked at the statement and glanced at the superior's face without leaving a trace. He suddenly felt that something was wrong. The superior did this to repay him for saving his life. If he really accepted it, the other party's favor would be repaid. In this world, favors were the most repaid. One could owe anything but a favor. If this man did not die, he would definitely be a powerful person in the future. A favor from such a person was more valuable than any patent. Moreover, Ning Shu had to help Zhu Xiyuan. It would be helpful for Zhu Xiyuan's future if he knew such a person. This was something that could not be bought with money. Moreover, after he left, this person would more or less take care of Zhu Sunyang. Ning Shu tore the statement and handed over the prescription he wrote before. He saluted and said, I am a citizen of this country. The prescription of this powder is nothing. If I can use this powder to save more soldiers, it will be my merit. The statement is too cliché, too cliché. The superior raised his eyebrows and glanced at Ning Shu. In the end, he laughed, took the prescription and left. Tang Zheng was 2 steps behind. Ning Shu said, you did the right thing. Ning Shu wiped the cold sweat on his head. He was almost blinded by money. Zhu Sunyang was a woman with a child in a troubled world. It was good to have someone to protect her. Zhu Yanqiu, who was tending the fire in the logistics department, heard that Ning Shu awarded the second-class military merit. Her eyes turned red. Her mind was full of impossible. How did that woman get the second-class military merit? Zhu Yanqiu threw away the fire stick in her hand and found Ning Shu. She questioned, "How did you get the second-class military merit? How did you get it? Did you do something dirty?" Ning Shu took off his gloves and slapped Zhu Yanqiu's face. Zhu Yanqiu's face was slapped to the side. She staggered twice before she could steady herself. Ning Shu said coldly, "What did you just say? Say it again." Zhu Yanqiu was slapped by Ning Shu so hard that she saw stars and felt dizzy. When she heard Ning Shu's words, she shouted out of reflex, "You shameless bitch. What kind of dirty things did you do when you're not a woman?" Zhu Yanqiu could not accept that this woman got the military merit. Why? Ning Shu slapped Zhu Yanqiu's face again. Half of her face was swollen, forming a sharp contrast with the other half. Chapter 588. Zhu Yanqiu felt dizzy after being slapped twice by Ning Shu. She fell to the ground and kept shaking her head. Her face was burning. She looked at Ning Shu in disbelief. "You dare to hit me? If you talk nonsense again, I will not only hit you, but also kill you," Ning Shu said coldly. Zhu Sunyang couldn't bear to kill such a person. No matter how much knowledge one learned, it couldn't change a person's vicious heart. Zhu Yanqiu was a beast in human clothing. Zhu Yanqiu was so angry that her whole body was trembling. "Zhu Sunyang, you are too arrogant." Ning Shu rolled his eyes and ignored her. Zhu Yanqiu could forget about rising up in this life. He would just be a cook for the rest of his life. Zhu Yanqiu whispered bitterly, "Zhu Sunyang, are you going to kill your husband? If you are a man, speak louder. Why are you whispering?" Ning Shu sneered. He wanted to use her husband's name to suppress her, but he didn't dare to say their relationship. He was simply speechless. It was Ning Shu's first time seeing such a strange Zhu Yanqiu. She didn't want to lose face and wanted people to treat her like an ancestor. "I can send you to heaven with a can of gas." Zhu Yanqiu saw Ning Shu's unscrupulous look and gnashed her teeth in hatred. She turned and left. For Ning Shu, Zhu Yanqiu was a clown. She only knew how to find a sense of existence on the weak and only knew how to bully Zhu Sunyang. Even though Ning Shu's status was different now, she still had a mysterious confidence when facing Ning Shu. Zhu Yanqiu was indignant about being beaten by Ning Shu and went around saying that Zhu Sunyang was just a servant that was sold to a large family by her parents. She also didn't know what kind of dog's hit luck she had to become a military doctor on the battlefield. She also said that Ning Shu's second-class merit was dubious. How could a woman get a second-class merit? Hearing these rumors, Ning Shu smacked his lips and stroked his chest. "Look, this is your husband, a narrow-minded and vicious man who talks about people everywhere like a gossipy woman." She succeeded, but Zhu Yanqiu didn't feel happy. Instead, she viciously spread rumors and was secretly jealous of her. Such a person, no matter how much you did to him, he would take it for granted. Ning Shu moved his wrist and beat Zhu Yanqiu. He said that if she heard such words again in the future, she would beat him every time she saw him. Zhu Yanqiu was asking for a beating. Fang Feifei came to find Zhu Yanqiu. Seeing that Zhu Yanqiu couldn't fight back after being beaten by Ning Shu and couldn't get up after being thrown over his shoulder, Fang Feifei frowned tightly. Ning Shu said unhappily, "Military Dr. Zhu, you've gone too far." Ning Shu sneered. "I've gone too far. Your boyfriend is the one who has gone too far. If you want to be together, don't provoke me. This man used to eat my food and use my money. The money he spent on your relationship was the money I earned from selling tofu. He didn't tell you these things, did he? Fang Feifei was stunned and then said, with Yanqiu's family background, does she still need the money you earned from selling tofu? The Zhu family is indeed a rich family, but that was several years ago. The Zhu family collapsed a long time ago. They even sold their house, and then the family, Zhu Sunyang, shut up. Zhu Yanqiu interrupted Ning Shu's words in panic and resentment. You stole the Zhu family's money, you traitorous bitch. Ning Shu sneered and said, at that time, all the money in the family was given to you to go to school. You said that you wanted to revitalize the Zhu family through studying, but you were gone for 3 or 4 years. Your tuition money and all the expenses were the money I earned from selling tofu. You didn't even go home when your mother died. Fang Feifei looked at Zhu Yanqiu blankly. Is this true? Feifei, don't listen to this woman's nonsense. Zhu Yanqiu grabbed Fang Feifei's arm in horror. Fang Feifei shook off Zhu Yanqiu's hand. Fang Feifei took 2 steps back and said with a sobbing voice, you lied to me again and again. I thought you had told me the truth before, but I didn't expect you to hide something from me. Zhu Yanqiu, I was worried about you and went to the battlefield with you. I didn't expect you to hide something from me. Is it fun to lie to me like this? Do you think I'm stupid? Fang Feifei saw Zhu Yanqiu, who was covered in black ashes and had ashes from the bottom of the pot on her head and face. She was completely different from the Zhu Yanqiu who was wearing bright clothes before. In addition, Zhu Yanqiu didn't have the aura of a young master anymore. She looked unbearable. Fang Feifei turned around and ran away. Zhu Yanqiu said to Ning Shu fiercely, Zhu Sunyang, you vicious woman. Then she chased after Fang Feifei. Ning Shu patted the dust on his hands and said goodbye. Pay attention to the sky when you run. There could be enemy air attacks at any time. Ning Shu didn't have time to pay attention to the love and hate entanglement of these 2 people. She was very busy. Time was life. Saving people was a race against time. Ning Shu thought that these 2 people would break up, but Fang Feifei came to her in the evening. And it was in the middle of the night. She probably knew that Ning Shu only had time in the middle of the night. Fang Feifei saw that Ning Shu began to pack up her things. She said to Ning Shu with a complicated expression, Dr. Zhu, I want to talk to you. Talk about what? What's there to talk about? We are not very close friends, and we don't talk about our hearts. To be honest, my husband is already with you. Do you still want to talk to me about your pursuit of happiness? I don't want to hear it. Ning Shu lay on the wooden board and planned to sleep. These people wanted to be entangled with each other. Ning Shu didn't want to care about them. Fang Feifei pursed her lips and said, I never wanted to hurt anyone, but the person I fell in love with happened to be your husband. Ning Shu, let's go out and talk. Let's talk about Zhu Yanqiu. Fang Feifei said, the 3 of us are entangled with each other. Hurting each other is not a problem. Problems have to be solved. Ning Shu said lightly, if you want to say something, say it here. There are many mosquitoes outside. I'm tired after a day. I'm too lazy to move. Fang Feifei had no choice. She hesitated for a moment and said, I know you have a way to treat Zhu Yanqiu's injury. I heard that you submitted a prescription and got a 2nd-class military merit. Ning Shu stretched out her finger and waved it. She said, first, I don't know how to treat Zhu Yanqiu. He fainted on his own. As long as you don't touch or rob him, there will be no problem except for some delicate work. Second, my military merit was earned by my efforts to save people and treat injured soldiers one after another. This is what I deserve. Can you bear to see Zhu Yanqiu circling around the boiler? Fang Feifei said somewhat helplessly, Yanqiu has knowledge and shouldn't be buried like this. I know you resent us, but in the current situation, one more person means one more power to fight against the enemy. Ning Shu grinned and said, who said that Zhu Yanqiu's talent was buried? It's not like you said. One more person means one more power to fight against the enemy. No matter what position, whether it's a logistics officer or a soldier, in this army, it's all about fighting against the enemy. Since it's all about fighting against the enemy, why care so much? Chapter 589. Ning Shu couldn't figure it out. Why should she treat Zhu Yanqiu's hand? Every time, Fang Feifei always stood on the side of righteousness and morality, asking her to treat Zhu Yanqiu's hand. It was as if she didn't treat Zhu Yanqiu's hand, she would be a sinner of the nation. She said that she was benevolent and righteous, but it was still moral kidnapping. If she didn't treat Zhu Yanqiu's hand, would she just wait to be abandoned? Ning Shu said lightly, there's nothing wrong with Zhu Yanqiu's hand at all. He fainted on his own. He's not sick at all. I can't treat it at all. I'm just a military doctor, not a miracle doctor. I can't treat every illness. Fang Feifei sighed, looked at Ning Shu and said, I know you're uncomfortable, but at this time, you should put these love and hatred aside, try to survive, and stop the invaders. Maybe Zhu Yanqiu will come back to you. Ning Shu, Sigma, degree, Ning Shu expressed that he was shocked. Zhu Yanqiu will come back to her. Haha. Maybe the two of them broke up because they were forced to break up. Zhu Yanqiu returned to Zhu Sunyang's side like a prodigal son, but she still loved Fang Feifei in her heart. Zhu Sunyang was still fucking miserable, guarding a heartless body. Zhu Yanqiu and Fang Feifei's love was purer after the baptism of gunfire. They both loved each other in their hearts. Maybe they met when they were old and gray-haired. Standing face to face and looking at each other, it was simply a touching love song of the times. Even if they weren't together, it didn't mean that there was no love between the two. So, military Dr. Zhu, I beg you to treat Zhu Yanqiu's hand. He should go to the battlefield to kill the enemy, not be a logistics officer, Fang Feifei said sincerely to Ning Shu. Ning Shu sneered in his heart and said, didn't you intellectuals accept the new ideas that people are equal and free? No matter if it's a soldier or a logistics officer, they are all contributing to the resistance against invasion. There's no distinction between high and low. It's just a different division of labor. Isn't this the idea you advocate? Zhu Yanqiu fainted from gunshot. It's safest for him to stay in the logistics department, and he can also contribute to the whole army. Miss Fang, do you look down on logistics officers? Fang Feifei said equality, freedom, and universal love, but in her heart, she divided people into different classes. She used this flag to achieve certain goals and do certain things openly, such as free love and opposing arranged marriage. She said it was to liberate the mind and liberate human nature. If she didn't agree, she was an old-fashioned with old-fashioned. Abandoning one's wife and children abandoning children. Fang Feifei was stunned by Ning Shu's words. She pursed her lips and said, I don't look down on logistics officers. Zhu Yanqiu is a college student. His talent shouldn't be wasted. It's not a matter of whether I look down on him or not. Ning Shu was at a loss. He looked at Fang Feifei and said, what talent? He goes to the battlefield to kill the enemy with a gun. What's the use of his foreign ideas? So what if he's talented? Does he have to recite love poems to the enemy? Zhu Yanqiu was not someone who graduated from a military academy. Seriously speaking, she was just a weak student. How could she be talented? Fang Feifei's face darkened. She said helplessly, you hate me and Zhu Yanqiu in your heart, but this is related to Zhu Yanqiu's future, so I beg you. Please, can you treat Zhu Yanqiu? Ning Shu, I said that I don't know how to treat at all. I don't know what's wrong with Zhu Yanqiu. Ning Shu stood up from the ground and patted the dust on his butt. I'm very tired. I'm going to rest. Don't chat with me so often in the future. I'm very busy. Time is life, understand? I don't want to care about you and Zhu Yanqiu. Zhu Yanqiu doesn't want to be with me, but do you think I want to be with Zhu Yanqiu? He's just a man who abandoned his wife and children. And Miss Fong, you'd better have some shame after stealing someone else's husband. You have no right to ask me to do anything, and don't hang around in front of me. Ning Shu sneered. He turned around and went into the tent to rest. What equality! He asked her to be high and mighty. To be more disgusting, he was full of thieves and prostitutes. Fong Feifei looked at Ning Shu's back and sighed. She didn't want to hurt anyone. She was also kept in the dark and didn't know anything. She seemed to be a happy woman, but she was also the same as Zhu Su and Yang. Fong Feifei went to find Zhu Yanqiu. Zhu Yanqiu was waiting for Fong Feifei. When she saw Fong Feifei, she quickly went up and asked, Feifei, what did Zhu Su and Yang say? Fong Feifei shook her head. Zhu Su and Yang is still the same. She said that she doesn't know how to treat it. I'm going back. Fong Feifei turned around and left. Seeing Fong Feifei's cold attitude, Zhu Yanqiu panicked. She quickly took Fong Feifei's hand and said, Feifei, are you angry with me? Fong Feifei looked up at Zhu Yanqiu. You lied to me again and again. You never told me the truth. You have a wife and children. I don't know anything. You said that your business was supported by your mother, but your family has long collapsed. You never told me the truth. I heard these things from Zhu Su and Yang. Wasn't she angry after being insulted by Zhu Su and Yang just now? She was very angry, but it seemed that she couldn't explain herself clearly. She became the person who ruined other people's families. She couldn't refute when others pointed at her and scolded her. She, Fong Feifei, had her own pride. She would never share a man with another woman. She didn't learn so much to be someone's concubine or concubine. Feifei, I never thought of lying to you. I just love you too much. I'm worried that you will leave me. The Zhu family fell after my father died. The reason why I didn't dare to tell you was that I was worried that you would leave me because of your family condition. I will fight for a place on the battlefield and give you the best and most glorious glory, Zhu Yanqiu said hurriedly. Fong Feifei pushed Zhu Yanqiu's hand away. We've known each other for such a long time. Don't you know what kind of person I am? I don't care about your family background. You're lying to me without telling me anything. This is the biggest insult to me. We need to calm down. Let's do this first. The most important thing now is to survive on the battlefield. I don't want to talk about feelings. Zhu Yanqiu's face fell instantly. She said painfully, Feifei, I can't live without you. Don't be like this. Fong Feifei shook her head, turned around and left without looking back. Her figure disappeared in the darkness. Zhu Yanqiu fell to the ground in a daze. She grabbed her hair and hammered her head with her fists. Her heart was in a pot of oil. The biggest injury to Zhu Yanqiu was that without Fong Feifei, he had never loved someone so much. Chapter 590. Too many things were stuck in Zhu Yanqiu's heart. His future, his ambitions, Fong Feifei seemed to want to break up with him, and Zhu Sunyang's disdain for him. It made Zhu Yanqiu feel unprecedented loss and helplessness. He was in so much pain that he wanted to die. Every day when he woke up, he had to cook. He was a young master of a big family, but now he was surrounded by smoke and fire all day long. This kind of life made Zhu Yanqiu collapse in pain. Zhu Yanqiu made up his mind. No matter what, he had to go to the battlefield. He had to go to the battlefield. Only by going to the battlefield could he solve his current predicament. But his hand, when it was mealtime, Ning Shu saw Zhu Yanqiu's red eyes and swollen eyelids. He seemed to have cried. Could it be that the two of them had broken up? Zhu Yanqiu noticed Ning Shu's gaze and glared at Ning Shu. He didn't even bother to talk to Ning Shu and turned to leave. Ning Shu looked at Zhu Yanqiu, who looked like she had lost her footing. No, she looked like she was heartbroken and wanted to die. She guessed that there were some twists and turns in their relationship. In the plot, Fang Feifei didn't know the truth until Zhu Yanqiu became successful and famous. Zhu Yanqiu had been hiding it until then. Fang Feifei knew about Zhu Sunyang's existence, but she believed what Zhu Yanqiu said. She believed that Zhu Sunyang was Zhu Yanqiu's sister. Fang Feifei knew the truth later and wanted to leave Zhu Yanqiu. At that time, Zhu Yanqiu was wearing a military uniform with a row of medals on his chest. He knelt on the ground and begged for Fang Feifei's forgiveness. A powerful and influential man knelt in front of her. Any woman's heart would tremble. In the days on the battlefield, the two of them supported each other and had a deep relationship. Fang Feifei loved Zhu Yanqiu in her heart. In addition, at this time, Zhu Sunyu was bedridden and there was no cure for her. Seeing that she was about to die, Fang Feifei also accepted Zhu Yanqiu's apology. But now, Zhu Yanqiu wasn't famous yet. His body was covered in black ash. He was completely different from the young master in the past. Without the halo of a young master, Zhu Yanqiu looked a lot dimmer. He hadn't killed a single enemy since the start of the battle, so he had become a logistics officer who didn't have much of a chance to perform any meritorious deeds. In addition, the conflict between the two of them had erupted prematurely, so it was possible for their relationship to end prematurely. Moreover, Fang Feifei was now a war reporter with some fame. There was a huge disparity between their statuses. In a situation where the woman was stronger than the man, it was easy for conflicts to arise in their relationship. Women were usually conquered by men who desired to be stronger. One had to know that the male and female animals would only choose to mate with the male that had won the battle. Alas, this touching and moving battle song might be a flop. Ning Shu didn't pay attention to Zhu Yanqiu and Fang Feifei because she was very busy now. She and Xiaotong were so tired that they couldn't even lift their hands. There were far more wounded than before. The battle line was constantly retreating, and the artillery fire was even more intense. Just the air raids alone occurred many times a day. Not only did Ning Shu have to treat the wounded, but he also had to prevent himself from being injured by the bomb. This battlefield could not be defended any longer. More and more soldiers were dying, and more were being injured. Their weapons were not as advanced as the enemy's, so they could only use their lives to destroy the enemy. This battlefield could not be defended any longer. It was going to fall. Struggling so bitterly was just delaying the arrival of that day. The body of the officer who had been shot earlier was getting worse. The wound was seriously infected, and even anti-inflammatory Western medicine was useless. Ning Shu had taken out the Western medicine that she had exchanged from the system store, but it was still useless. It was already a fatal injury. In addition to the harsh environment, he couldn't rest well. He was under great pressure every day. The future of the entire army was on his shoulders. The officer asked Ning Shu to save his life no matter what. He couldn't die now. He had to hold on until reinforcements came. He had to hold on until the higher-ups gave the order to retreat. Ning Shu felt very numb. Since Western medicine didn't work, he used the traditional Chinese medicine left by his ancestors. Ning Shu applied fresh herbs to the officer's wound and wrapped it with gauze. The effect of the traditional Chinese medicine was mild. Although the effect was slow, it stabilized the officer's injury and didn't continue to worsen. These herbs were drawn by Ning Shu and explained the growing environment. Ning Shu sent the guards to the mountains to collect the herbs. Ning Shu was now very glad that he had learned medical skills from the miracle doctor in a certain dimension. It allowed him to deal with such situations easily. The things he learned would always be of great use. After treating the officer's wound, Ning Shu carried the medicine box back to the tent. There were wounded people everywhere. They had all kinds of wounds on their bodies and their faces were full of pain and despair. Xiao Tong was busy alone. Her calves and stomach were trembling, but she gritted her teeth and persevered. There were too many wounded people. Ning Shu and Xiao Tong did not stop treating them. Their minds were in a daze. Before they could react to the wounds, they were already holding tools in their hands. They were completely relying on their body's instincts to do things. There was the sound of the Air Force whistling above their heads. They would drop 2 bombs from time to time. Their nerves were highly strung. They were tired, very tired. Under such circumstances, Ning Shu's heart was filled with despair. He didn't know when it would end and what his fate would be in the next moment. War reaped human lives, destroyed civilization, and destroyed people's beliefs. Ning Shu was so busy that his mind was in a daze. He heard someone call him, Zhu Sunyang. Ning Shu ignored him. That voice called him again. Ning Shu only reacted then. He turned his head and saw Zhu Yanqiu lying on the wooden plank. He saw that his leg was really bleeding. It was dripping down his calf to the ground. Zhu Sunyang. Zhu Yanqiu's voice was filled with pain and fear. Ning Shu walked over and touched Zhu Yanqiu's leg. When Zhu Yanqiu was touched by Ning Shu, he was in so much pain that he kept gasping and sweating all over. Zhu Yanqiu's calf bone was broken. There was a neat incision below his knee. He was cut by a knife on his leg. When the skin and flesh were peeled away, one could vaguely see the bone inside. Blood was flowing out from the incision. It looked very scary. Zhu Sunyang, will my leg be okay? Zhu Yanqiu's voice trembled. He was in pain and scared. Ning Shu frowned. What was Zhu Yanqiu doing? How could he get such an injury? Ning Shu took a needle and sewed up the wound. Then he sprinkled some hemostatic powder and bandaged the wound. He used a thin rope to tie a few wooden sticks together with the leg to fix the leg. Zhu Yanqiu asked Ning Shu, will my leg be okay? I don't know. Maybe there will be a problem. Maybe there won't be a problem. Ning Shu turned around and went to work. He didn't even want to know why Zhu Yanqiu was injured. Zhu Yanqiu grabbed his head in pain and looked at his leg. His heart was filled with fear. When the bayonet reflected the sunlight and cut his leg, his heart was filled with fear and despair. His leg and the ambition in his heart. Zhu Sunyang. Zhu Yanqiu shouted at the busy Ning Shu. Ning Shu ignored him. There were so many wounded people waiting to be saved. He didn't have time to chat with Zhu Yanqiu. Chapter 591. In the end, the battlefield could not be defended. The order to retreat came from the top. The officer sighed and gave the order to retreat. Then, the army quickly retreated. This piece of land fell into enemy hands. The morale of the troops was low. They carried the wounded and retreated. The faces of the soldiers were covered in soot. Their eyes were tired and numb. Ning Shu carried the medicine box and followed the army. It was convenient for him to help when the wounded needed treatment. Xiao Tong followed beside Ning Shu. She was panting. Ning Shu asked her to get into the truck. Xiao Tong shook her head. She looked a little scared. She said to Ning Shu, Master, I don't know where to go. On the battlefield, Xiao Tong felt her value. She was able to follow her master to save people. But now that they were retreating, she did not know where to go. When she walked into the crowd again, Xiao Tong remembered that she was violated. She was afraid that others would mock and despise her. Ning Shu thought for a while and said, Follow me. You can become a military doctor. This invasion would last for a long time. There would be a shortage of military doctors. After he left, Zhu Sunyang and Xiao Tong would be good partners. Thank you, Master. Xiao Tong looked a little relieved. Dr. Zhu, a soldier in front, kept complaining that his leg hurts. He wants you to go and take a look. A soldier ran over to Ning Shu. Okay. Ning Shu carried the medicine box and walked over. Xiao Tong followed behind Ning Shu. Ning Shu said to her, "You don't have to follow me. Go to the truck." Ning Shu was able to withstand it because he practiced the ultimate martial arts. His physique was strong. However, Xiao Tong was only a weak woman. She could not be compared to him. "Master, I can do it." Xiao Tong gritted her teeth. She looked determined. Ning Shu saw her like this and let her follow him. The person who kept complaining of pain was Zhu Yanqiu. Zhu Yanqiu was lying on a stretcher and being carried by two soldiers. "What kind of pain is your leg?" Ning Shu put down the box and asked Zhu Yanqiu. He untied the stick and bandage on his leg and found that it was a little inflamed. Ning Shu took some fresh herbs, chewed them, and applied them to the wound. Zhu Yanqiu stared blankly at Ning Shu, watching her meticulously treat her wound. She asked, "Zhu Sunyang, when did you learn how to do this?" Ning Shu tied a knot on the gauze and coldly said, "Learn from others." Zhu Yanqiu looked hesitant. She looked at her leg and asked, "Will my leg recover?" "I don't know. We will only know when we arrive at the hospital. Don't move." Ning Shu looked at Zhu Yanqiu's leg. He estimated that there would be sequelae. After all, the bone was injured. Zhu Yanqiu looked defeated and uneasy. Obviously, she knew about her injury. That was why she kept asking Ning Shu to confirm it again and again. She just wanted to feel at ease. He gritted his teeth and went to the battlefield. He didn't expect that his leg would be cut by the enemy when he was fighting with a bayonet. At that time, he spent a lot of effort to put the enemy on the ground. As a result, the enemy lying on the ground cut his leg with a bayonet. Zhu Yanqiu didn't go through military training because of her illness. Of course, she was slow to encounter this kind of thing. She didn't grow up slowly on the battlefield like in the plot. Eager for success and instant benefits, it was easy to get into trouble. Zhu Yanqiu also felt a little regretful. Ning Shu looked around and didn't see Fang Feifei. Now that the army had retreated, Fang Feifei, the war reporter, should have retreated with the army. Why didn't he see her? Especially now that Zhu Yanqiu was injured. Zhu Yanqiu had been injured for so long. Did they really break up? Ning Shu was too lazy to care about these two people. However, love was really too fragile. It could die prematurely for various reasons. However, not everything had to give way for love. True love wasn't a reason. When Ning Shu returned to the bustling Shanghai again, he felt as if it was a lifetime ago. He hadn't seen such a peaceful atmosphere for a long time. There was no rain of bullets, no whistling air force in the sky, and no wailing soldiers in pain. These peace and tranquility were all exchanged for by the soldiers on the front line with their lives. Ning Shu brought Xiaotong back to his home. The two of them took a shower and then fell asleep on the comfortable bed. They didn't want to do anything and slept first. When they woke up, it was already a day later. Ning Shu wore his military uniform and the second-class military medal on his chest. He wore military boots and went to the boarding school to see Zhu Xiyuan. He hadn't seen Zhu Xiyuan for a while. Zhu Xiyuan had grown a lot taller and his body was very strong. "Mother." Zhu Xiyuan ran to Ning Shu. He didn't throw himself into Ning Shu's arms like he did when he was young. His behavior was much more restrained. However, his eyes were a little red when he looked at Ning Shu. Ning Shu smiled and said, "Xiyuan, mother is back. Let's go home." Zhu Xiyuan nodded desperately. He asked Ning Shu all kinds of questions along the way. When he found out that Ning Shu received the second-class military medal, he couldn't take his eyes off the medal. Ning Shu handed the medal to Zhu Xiyuan. Zhu Xiyuan took the medal carefully and looked at it over and over again. He said to Ning Shu, "Mother, I will also go to the battlefield in the future and drive the invaders out of our land." Ning Shu smiled and nodded. When they returned home, Xiaotong had already prepared dinner. When she saw Ning Shu and Zhu Xiyuan, she was a little reserved. Ning Shu introduced Xiaotong to Zhu Xiyuan. Zhu Xiyuan greeted Xiaotong as Sister Xiaotong. At the dining table, Zhu Xiyuan kept pestering Ning Shu. He wanted Ning Shu to talk about what happened on the battlefield. When he thought about all kinds of things on the battlefield, Ning Shu lost his appetite. He said to Zhu Xiyuan, "Xiyuan, don't ask Mother. Mother will write down everything later. You can read it yourself." Ning Shu wanted to organize all the injuries he encountered on the battlefield into a book. He wanted to write down all the situations he encountered. Well, the title would be, "I am a battlefield military doctor." Ning Shu began to write down what he encountered on the battlefield like a diary. He wrote down how he worked, what injuries the soldiers suffered on the battlefield, and how to treat the wounds. Every time he wrote down a little, Zhu Xiyuan would be the first to read it. Every time she finished reading, she would look at Ning Shu with admiration, heartache, and anger. She asked, "Are the invaders really so cruel?" "Well, war is just that cruel," Ning Shu said. After Zhu Xiyuan finished reading it, she even brought it to school to show the other students. Ning Shu did not mind. She would probably be sent to the battlefield soon. This was only a short retreat. This war still had a long, long time to go. When he was free, Ning Shu would teach Xiaotong some military medical knowledge. Xiaotong had been on the battlefield before, so she understood it very quickly. Ning Shu felt that he had been in this world for quite a long time, especially after returning from the battlefield. He felt that he had lived for more than half of his life. There was no other world that could make Ning Shu feel so tired and weary. A newspaper came to Ning Shu and wanted to publish "I am a battlefield military doctor," written by Ning Shu. Ning Shu agreed without saying anything. It was fine to publish it. Now that the nation was in danger, it was good to let the ordinary people know about the war. The newspaper even gave him some royalties. Ning Shu kept it and saved it for Zhu Xiyuan's marriage. Chapter 592. Ning Shu took the diary to the newspaper office and met Fang Feifei. Fang Feifei wore a camera on her chest and was dressed neatly. When she saw Ning Shu, her eyes flashed. She smiled and said gracefully and generously, "Dr. Zhu, I didn't expect to meet you here. Zhu Yanqiu is injured. Have you seen him?" Now Zhu Yanqiu was lying in the hospital. The doctor said that his leg would be affected when he walked. Running and jumping would hurt his leg bones. Or was it because he was delayed on the battlefield, where there was no good medical condition? Hearing Ning Shu's words, Fang Feifei frowned and then relaxed. She said with melancholy, "I didn't see him because I don't think it's necessary. Even if we were in love, the damage has been done. Our relationship can't go back to the past. Instead of enduring the knot in our hearts and being together with each other in the end, it's better to break up now and leave a good memory." "Your words are so nice," Ning Shu said with a smile. "Dr. Zhu, you go ahead. I'm going to hand in the photos." Fang Feifei waved the camera in her hand. Ning Shu narrowed his eyes and looked at Fang Feifei. Fang Feifei had dumped Zhu Yanqiu. Now Zhu Yanqiu was lying alone in the hospital with no one around him. Now Zhu Yanqiu had nothing. Even if Fang Feifei liked Zhu Yanqiu in her heart, in reality, there were too many things involved. If Zhu Yanqiu succeeded now, Fang Feifei might not have left Zhu Yanqiu. Fang Feifei was a person who had received a new education. She knew how to plan for herself. She didn't have the thought of a feudal woman sacrificing for others. She knew how to plan for herself. She left very naturally. Zhu Yanqiu really deserved it. But if Fang Feifei thought that she could get rid of Zhu Yanqiu like this, she was a bit naive. Zhu Yanqiu had been spoiled since he was a child. In fact, he was a person who hadn't been weaned off his mother's milk. He loved Fang Feifei so much. Now Zhu Yanqiu had nothing. He should hold on to Fang Feifei tightly in the name of love. Ning Shu gave the diary to the newspaper and left. He took Zhu Xiyuan to the hospital to see Zhu Yanqiu. Zhu Yanqiu was very thin. Lying by the bed, there wasn't even anyone around to take care of him. Compared to the storyline where he was surrounded by attendants wherever he went, he had both power and beauty. Now, Zhu Yanqiu was so down and out that he couldn't even look at him. Go and see him. He is your father. Ning Shu Zhu Xiyuan said, he didn't fulfill his responsibility as a father, but he gave you life. You just need to fulfill your responsibility to him. Father doesn't like me. Zhu Xiyuan pouted. Zhu Yanqiu turned around and saw the mother and son standing at the door. Her eyes focused on Zhu Xiyuan, and her lips moved. Xiyuan. Zhu Xiyuan hesitated for a moment before walking in. Ning Shu turned around and left. He had no intention of going in. Ning Shu stood in the corridor and waited for Zhu Xiyuan. When Zhu Xiyuan came out, his expression was very strange. Ning Shu asked, "What's wrong?" Zhu Xiyuan glanced at Ning Shu and said hesitantly, "Father asked me to find someone called Fang Feifei and ask her to come to the hospital." Ning Shu, just wait and see if you can wait for Fang Feifei. Even at this time, Zhu Yanqiu still had Fang Feifei in his heart. He even asked his son to find someone for him. Zhu Yanqiu, you should prepare to be alone for the rest of your life. Fang Feifei was actually the person who could hurt Zhu Yanqiu the most. Because Zhu Yanqiu loved Fang Feifei, it was just like how Zhu Yanqiu could hurt Zhu Sunyang and hurt people in the name of love. Mother, don't be sad. I will be filial to you. Zhu Xiyuan saw that Ning Shu didn't speak, so he patted his chest and said. Ning Shu nodded. Mother will wait for Xiyuan to be filial. Ning Shu's military doctor diary unexpectedly received a great response. In fact, Ning Shu didn't write well, but now that the country was being invaded, he needed something to arouse the people's feelings of hatred. It could only be said that it was fate. It made Ning Shu, the female military doctor on the battlefield, famous. The current Zhu Sunyang was no longer the abandoned woman. She had her own career. Even if she didn't receive a new education, she was still an advanced woman. Ding, mission completed. Do you want to leave the mission world? 2333's voice sounded in his mind. Ning Shu felt that he hadn't heard 2333's voice in a long time. Yes. Ning Shu's head was dizzy. When he opened his eyes, he was already in the system space. Seeing the familiar decorations, Ning Shu's heart calmed down a lot. He looked down and saw that his soul was very strong. He touched his face and felt like he was touching jelly. Let's see the points this time. Ning Shu said. Okay. Ning Shu's status panel appeared in front of him. Number, 23333 Name, Ning Shu, Beginner Mission Taker, Age, 27 points, 1. 65 million/1. 5 million Soul, 300 Health, 71 Wisdom, 170 Charm, 4 Luck, 44 Spirit, 120 Faith, 1430 Aptitude, 39 Martial Strength, 112 Merit, 620 Skills, 5th Ring Shooting Technique, Trash Fighting Technique, Beginner Peerless Martial Arts, Beginner Poison Technique, Beginner Business Management Knowledge, Beginner Code Programming, Beginner Lawyer Skills Honorary Title, Goddess of War, Selfless Ancestor Tools, Calm Aura, Amulet Aura, Mother of the World, Queen's Blessing, Model Worker, Chen Shi's Blessing, leader aura. Grass blessing, best friend, Miao Miao Miao's blessing, life-saving hand, Zhu Sunyang's blessing, fulfill Zhu Sunyang's wish, to not be burdened by the Zhu family, to live her own life with Zhu Xiyuan. Mission completion progress, 100%. Obtained 1. 5 million points, 60 attribute points, 20 merit points, 30 faith, and 1 more life-saving aura. The reward this time was great. With 60 attribute points, her stats would soon be up. 2333's voice was filled with joy. Congratulations, you now have 3 million points. You can be promoted to an intermediate mission taker. Do you want to be promoted? Of course I want to be promoted. But before that, I want to ask, after I'm promoted, will the system still be yours? Ning Shu asked. 2333 immediately said, of course it will be me. We are already bound. Even if you become an intermediate mission taker, the support system will still be mine. Ning Shu, I have nothing to live for. Suddenly, I have no desire to be promoted. Do you want to be promoted? 2333 asked Ning Shu. Yes. Please wait a moment. 2333 said. Ning Shu waited. He thought that there would be some changes in the system space, but after a while, nothing happened. Ning Shu asked, is it done? It's done. 2333 said. This is it. Ning Shu was flabbergasted. 2333 said as if it was natural, it's done. I changed your attribute panel. Now you are an intermediate mission taker. Damn, why do I feel so weak? Chapter 593. Ning Shu opened the attribute panel and distributed the 60 points. He added 30 points to wisdom, 10 points to luck, 10 points to strength, and 10 points to aptitude. Number, 23333 Name, Ning Shu, Intermediate Quest Taker, Age, 27 points, 1. 65 million/1. 5 million Soul, 300 HP, 71 Wisdom, 17030 Charm, 4 Luck, 4410 MP, 120 Faith, 44 Strength, 11210 Aptitude, 3910 Merit, 26 Skills, 5th Ring Shooting Technique, Trash Fighting Technique, Beginner Level Peerless Martial Arts, Beginner Poison Technique, Beginner Business Management Knowledge, Beginner Code Programming, Beginner Lawyer Skills Honorary Title, Goddess of War, Selfless Ancestor Tools, Calm Aura, Amulet Aura, Mother of the World, Queen's Blessing, Model Worker, Chen Shi's Blessing, Leader Aura. Grass Blessing, Best Friend, Miao Miao Miao's Blessing, Life-Saving Hand, Zhu Sunyang's Blessing. After Ning Shu distributed the attribute points, he found that his charm was only 4 points. If he had known earlier, he would have squeezed a point from his teeth and added it to his charm. After becoming an intermediate quest taker, Ning Shu's heart lit up with hope. He asked 2333, can I go back for a while? Go back where? 2333 was puzzled. Since I'm an intermediate quest taker, can I go back to the world where I was born? Before, Ning Shu hid these things in his heart because he couldn't control his own fate. Now that he was an intermediate quest taker, he had some rights to speak. Ning Shu wanted to go back to see his parents, and wanted to exchange some body-strengthening pills for them from the system store. Ning Shu had 2 older brothers. To be honest, their relationship was very indifferent. Ning Shu stayed in the hospital since she was 10 years old, and she stayed there for so many years. Before, her parents still cared about her and came to the hospital to see her every day. But after a long time, they became indifferent and paid the medical fees at a fixed time. Ning Shu was still grateful to them. At least they had the money for her treatment. Although the time in the hospital was painful, she was still alive and was brought into the system space after her death. 2333 said, no, questers cannot go to any plane without a quest. I will keep an eye out for you. If there is a quest for that plane, I will accept it for you. Ning Shu said with some disappointment, I'm just afraid that when I can go back, they won't be here anymore. The laws of time in every dimension are different. Maybe a second in this world is a year in another world, maybe 1,000 years in another world. 2333 comforted Ning Shu. However, Ning Shu was not comforted at all. Instead, he was very unsettled by 2333's words. What if the plane he was born in was already 1,000 years old? Actually, there is another way, 2333 said. What is it? Ning Shu felt that 2333's ideas were usually quite ridiculous. When you are strong enough to turn back time, even if 1,000 years have passed, you will still be able to see your parents, 2333 said. Ning Shu, go away, go away, go away. To be able to change time, how powerful was that? If she was that powerful, the first thing she would do would be to kick 2333. Ning Shu sighed. She just wanted to go home and take a look. Your next mission is a trial mission for an intermediate quest enforcer. 2333 said, every time you level up, there will be a trial mission. Ning Shu recalled Mu Yenluo's and the 7 Calabash brothers' mission. He suddenly had a bad feeling. Is it a normal mission? Is there a difference between normal and abnormal quests? 2333 sounded doubtful. A quest is a quest. A system would never be able to understand a person's thoughts. It would never be able to understand a person's feelings of despair. What if I fail the mission? What if I fail the trial mission? Ning Shu asked. Will I be obliterated? Of course. If you fail, you will lose the title of Intermediate Quest Enforcer. The next time you level up to Intermediate Quest Enforcer, you will need 6 million points, 2333 said. Ning Shu was speechless. What a scam, what a difficult feeling. Oh right, you can't exchange for anything from the trial quest. Even if you do, you can't use it. 2333 added. Ning Shu hurriedly asked, even the most basic necessities of life can't be provided? Not even the fasting pills and water? Yes. 2333 emphasized. Anything. Ning Shu. =_ smiley face. What's the matter? That's why I'm here. That's why I'm here. Watch this old lady scatter the flowers, why is it so unfair? Ning Shu asked in confusion, why do I feel like this mission is trying to kill me? Nope. This mission is to test the quest taker's ability in all aspects without relying on external items, 2333 said matter-of-factly. Ning Shu was speechless. Then can I cultivate peerless martial arts? Can I concoct poison? Ning Shu asked somewhat powerlessly. These are your own abilities. You can use them as long as they are not obtained from the system. 2333 said. Ning Shu asked again, then can I use my 2 items, the calming halo and the talisman of protection? Subconsciously, Ning Shu felt that this mission was a scam. He had to ask what he needed to know. Oh, you can use these 2 items because they are exchanged with merit points and faith points. They belong to you for life. 2333 said. As expected, faith points and merit points were the good things. Compared to these 2 items, points were not that valuable. However, he did not know how to obtain merit and power of faith. May I ask what world the trial will be in? Ancient or modern? Ning Shu asked. 2333 said casually, randomly choose. Ning Shu was speechless. Fuck, he regretted not adding all his attribute points to luck points. Usually, Ning Shu was not confident in things that relied on luck. Will the mission be difficult? Ning Shu asked. It's random. It depends on your luck. It could be difficult, or it could be easy. It depends on what kind of mission you get. Haven't you heard that luck is also a kind of strength? 2333 said carelessly. Good luck. I have faith in you. Thank you. Ning Shu said somewhat powerlessly. Ning Shu took a deep breath. He sat cross-legged on the ground and began to cultivate his peerless martial arts. No matter what kind of mission it was, he had to maintain sufficient mental strength. After cultivating for a while, Ning Shu opened his eyes. He was a little upset about this mission. If he failed, not only would he be disqualified as an intermediate quest taker, but the next level up would not require 3 million points. Instead, it would require 6 million points. Just hearing this number made him despair. It was not easy to level up. Ning Shu hoped that this mission would be easier. Chapter 594. Ning Shu had to admit that he was worried. He started to panic as he paced back and forth in the system space. You look like a dog biting its tail, 2333 said. Ning Shu was speechless. Can you give me a hint about the mission? Ning Shu asked 2333. I'm a little scared. No, maybe the mission is very simple. 2333 comforted Ning Shu. I'm not scared. Ning Shu was speechless. It's not like you're the one doing the mission. Ning Shu thought about it and realized that he was being too scared. He chanted the mind-cleansing mantra in his heart. He thought about it and realized that it was not a big deal. He could just start all over again. After completing so many missions, Ning Shu felt that he should be able to complete this trial mission. Ning Shu walked around the virtual space again. Most importantly, he wanted to eat at the restaurant. No matter how much he ate at the restaurant, he would not feel bloated. It would dissipate as soon as he ate. In order to satisfy his craving, Ning Shu spent a few thousand points to buy a table full of dishes and tried all kinds of food. Luckily, you're just a soul. If you eat so much, you'll definitely become a fatty, 2333 said in disdain. It was because he knew that he was just a soul that he could eat so much without any restraint. After a hearty meal, Ning Shu returned to the system space. She calmed herself down and took out a book from the bookshelf. Then, she calmed herself down and started reading. After finishing the book, Ning Shu slowly watered the potted plants and ran on the treadmill for a while. He was just randomly touching the plants. Do you not want to enter the mission? Why are you dawdling? 2333 asked. Ning Shu sat cross-legged on the sofa and said, I'm not ready yet. Let me be mentally prepared. What do you need to be prepared for? 2333 sounded confused. Mentally prepared. 2333, system notification, 2333 doesn't want to talk to you and threw a pile of shit at you. Ning Shu stretched lazily. He had originally wanted to enter the mission world, but he suddenly thought of something. Since 2333 was useless, there might be someone who knew what to pay attention to in the trial mission. Ning Shu stepped into the tunnel leading to the virtual space. He felt dizzy, and when he opened his eyes, he was already on the street. Ning Shu did not delay and went straight to the consultation room. When he arrived at the door of the consultation room, Ning Shu first mourned in his heart for the points he was about to lose. Walking into the consultation room, Ning Shu caught a whiff of an agarwood fragrance. When he breathed it in, he felt a cooling sensation in his soul. It was as if all the dirt in his soul was slowly disappearing. Ning Shu's nose twitched hard as he tried to inhale the fragrance of the agarwood. The silver-haired man came out from the inner room, holding a book with a leather cover in his hand. He sat down unhurriedly, his every movement carrying the etiquette of an ancient aristocrat. The silver-haired man placed the book in his hand on the table, opened it, and said to Ning Shu without raising his head, "Please sit." Ning Shu sat across from the silver-haired man, his nose still quietly inhaling the agarwood fragrance. He asked the silver-haired man, is there anything I need to pay attention to in the intermediate trial mission? No, I want to ask first, how much does this mission cost? 1,000,000 points, the silver-haired man said calmly. Ning Shu thought, go to hell, go to hell. Ning Shu's face twitched. Last time, it was 300,000. This time, it was 1,000,000. Why is it so expensive? Fortunately, he had asked before. Otherwise, if he had asked for 1,000,000 points, Ning Shu would have been scared out of his wits. You can also choose not to ask. Pay 200,000 points and you can go, the silver-haired man said calmly, his bony fingers flipping the pages of the book. Ning Shu was almost stunned by the pair of hands, but he quickly reacted and asked, why do I have to pay 200,000 points if I don't ask? How black-hearted. He could have just casually asked for 1,000,000 points. You can just go and rob me. I've never seen such a black-hearted person. Unfortunately, I can only find this person. The silver-haired man looked up at Ning Shu. From the moment you enter this consultation room, you will be charged. The agarwood you smell is a very precious item. Its value cannot be estimated. Ning Shu immediately held his breath. I'm not inhaling. Not asking would waste 200,000 points, so he might as well ask questions. Ning Shu asked, I want to know what I need to pay attention to in the trial mission. It's not only the beginner trial mission, but also the intermediate trial mission and the advanced trial mission. There are even higher levels above. Let's not talk about whether or not you can complete the trial mission. The most important thing is to protect your own life and not die during the mission. As long as you wait for the auxiliary system to notify you that you can leave the mission world, the mission will be considered completed. The mission completion rate will be 60%, and you will pass the trial, the silver-haired man said slowly, and Ning Shu heard it very clearly. Ning Shu felt a little more confident. At the same time, he felt a chill in his heart. He asked, the trial mission is life-threatening? Of course. The higher you go, the more dangerous the trial mission is, the silver-haired man said. No matter what the trial is, you can continue the mission as long as you protect your own life and don't die during the mission. Ning Shu nodded to show that he understood. He should have asked the experts. However, when he thought of the consultation fee, Ning Shu's liver hurt. No, his liver was bursting. Ning Shu trembled as he took out his points card and paid 1,000,000 points. When he left the consultation room, Ning Shu walked very slowly and inhaled the agarwood. Every time he breathed in, he felt a chill in his soul. His heart was very calm. It was really good stuff. Ning Shu looked at the consultation room's signboard. He was cheated again. His heart was tired. Ning Shu could feel that this silver-haired man was very strong. At least in this virtual world, no one could mess with him. Ning Shu wanted to go back on his words, but he didn't dare. Ning Shu could see that 2333 might or might not know the rules of the trial, but 2333 couldn't say these things out loud. Sigh, I'm so weak. I'm just an ant. Back in the system space, Ning Shu asked 2333, am I very weak? Very weak, 2333 said. But everyone starts from weak to strong. I thought you wouldn't be able to hold on for so long, but you are now an intermediate mission taker. You will get stronger in the future. Don't worry about the 1,000,000 points. It's worth it to use the points to exchange for the senior's guidance. 2333 looked at Ning Shu's pained face. Don't be petty. Be generous. Ning Shu, hee, all you know is to play dead and say useless things. I'm really speechless. However, 2333 wasn't as sure that he couldn't go on like before. He was encouraging him now. Before, he was indifferent and didn't think much of him as a mission taker. Chapter 595. Zhu Xiyuan went to the hospital to see Zhu Yanqiu with the chicken soup made by Sister Xiaotong. But his nominal father asked him when he saw him, "Xiyuan, can you help me find Fang Feifei? Ask her to come and see me." Zhu Xiyuan was only a child less than 10 years old. It was not easy for him to come to the hospital alone to see Zhu Yanqiu. The world was so big. Where could he find this woman called Fang Feifei? He had only seen her twice and didn't know her at all. Zhu Xiyuan was speechless. His mother said that she would do her duty to his father, but Zhu Xiyuan didn't even want to see his father like this. He kept muttering the name of another woman. His mother was his wife. Why did he keep muttering the name of another woman? Zhu Xiyuan put down the chicken soup and turned to leave. Zhu Yanqiu shouted at Zhu Xiyuan's back, "Xiyuan, you must help me." Zhu Xiyuan wanted to say that he couldn't do it. What kind of father was he? Zhu Xiyuan went back home and told Zhu Sunyang about this. Zhu Sunyang was a little absent-minded. Now all kinds of images flashed through her mind, frame by frame. Zhu Sunyang looked at her hand and reached out to hold the scalpel in the box. She instantly felt that the scalpel was like her own hand. "Mother, I don't want to see father." Zhu Xiyuan frowned and said to Zhu Sunyang. He felt that his father's mind was not clear. Zhu Sunyang said carelessly, "Then don't go." Zhu Sunyang was touching all kinds of medical equipment over and over again. He wants to see Fang Feifei. Every time he went to see his father, he would only talk about Fang Feifei. Zhu Sunyang thought for a while and said, "If he wants to see her, then let him." Zhu Sunyang contacted Fang Feifei through the newspaper and asked her to see Zhu Yanqiu. Fang Feifei was a little impatient and said, "This is your husband. Why do you want me to see your husband? It was a beautiful mistake that Zhu Yanqiu and I met and got to know each other. Now we have to correct this mistake." Zhu Sunyang looked at Fang Feifei and said, "Since you love each other so much, why don't you take a look at him until now? It's impossible for me and Zhu Yanqiu to be together. I was stupid before, but now I want to live for myself. Since you love each other so much, I will fulfill your love. Zhu Yanqiu loves you so much, you won't be so cruel, right?" Fang Feifei pursed her lips and looked at Zhu Sunyang. This woman was obviously inferior to her in every aspect, but now she was more famous than her because of the book, "I Am a Battlefield Military Doctor." Now, she was acting so magnanimous in front of her. She was obviously an illiterate woman, so what was she so confident about? Shouldn't your love be unswerving and mutual support? Now that Zhu Yanqiu has a small problem, are you going to abandon him? Zhu Sunyang looked at Fang Feifei in confusion. Didn't you say before that it's not easy to meet someone you know and someone you can talk to in this life? Since it's not easy, don't give up so easily. Zhu Sunyang returned Fang Feifei's words back to her. Fang Feifei didn't look well, but she still took the time to go to the hospital. When she arrived at the hospital, she saw Zhu Yanqiu's appearance. He had lost a lot of weight, and even his eyes were sunken. There was a gloomy aura all over him. He didn't look good in the hospital gown, and there was a sense of death in the gloominess. When Zhu Yanqiu saw Fang Feifei, his eyes lit up. He hurriedly got up from the bed and hugged Fang Feifei. Fang Feifei immediately smelled an unpleasant smell on Zhu Yanqiu's body. It was the smell of decay on a person who had been ill for a long time. Fang Feifei pushed Zhu Yanqiu away and politely asked about Zhu Yanqiu's health. Zhu Yanqiu was very happy about Fang Feifei's arrival. But now Zhu Yanqiu was so down and out that Fang Feifei couldn't bear to look at him directly. The image of Zhu Yanqiu in high spirits gradually blurred in Fang Feifei's mind, as if it was possessed by magic. Now there was only Zhu Yanqiu's current appearance in Fang Feifei's mind. Fang Feifei almost ran away. Zhu Yanqiu saw Fang Feifei's perfunctory attitude and panicked. After Zhu Yanqiu was discharged from the hospital, she looked for Fang Feifei everywhere. She even found the place where Fang Feifei lived. She waited for Fang Feifei every day and pestered Fang Feifei. Zhu Yanqiu had a criminal record. Just like how she went to the hospital every day to block Ning Shu, she was used to this kind of pestering trick. Fang Feifei was annoyed by Zhu Yanqiu. She felt a little guilty before, but this little bit of guilt was consumed by Zhu Yanqiu's pestering. Now Fang Feifei just wanted Zhu Yanqiu to get lost. If Zhu Yanqiu was so obsessed with Fang Feifei after she became successful, Fang Feifei wouldn't be so disgusted. The nature of the two was completely different. One was pursuing, the other was sexual harassment. Especially now, Zhu Yanqiu's legs still had problems. It couldn't be seen when she walked slowly, but it could be seen when she ran or walked a little faster. Fang Feifei tried to get rid of Zhu Yanqiu. The more Fang Feifei was like this, the more Zhu Yanqiu wanted to hold on to Fang Feifei. Now Zhu Yanqiu had nothing. She just wanted to hold on to the woman she loved deeply. In a fit of anger, Fang Feifei ran to the front line with her camera. Zhu Yanqiu also ran to the battlefield. However, because of Zhu Yanqiu's health, and because she couldn't hold a gun, she did her old job, which was being a logistics officer. She always tried to give Fang Feifei special treatment, but Fang Feifei didn't appreciate it at all. Every time, Fang Feifei threw the bowl on the ground very rudely and told Zhu Yanqiu not to follow her. Zhu Yanqiu was very angry. She said that Fang Feifei was cruel, but the next day, she still served food to Fang Feifei. Fang Feifei didn't throw the bowl at random. Fang Feifei had an ambiguous relationship with a young officer in the army. Zhu Yanqiu knew about it and was very excited. She even wanted to hit the officer. However, the officer took out a gun and pointed it at Zhu Yanqiu's forehead. Zhu Yanqiu didn't dare to make trouble at once. But because of this, the officer's attitude towards Fang Feifei also became cold. Fang Feifei was beautiful and did things quickly. She was very popular with men. But now it was a special time. As the upper class of the army, the officer had to ensure the harmony of the army. He couldn't take the lead to do such a thing. Fang Feifei was very angry. She was sick of Zhu Yanqiu. Her eyes were full of disgust when she looked at Zhu Yanqiu. Zhu Yanqiu was very happy in her heart. She even told Fang Feifei that the person was playing with her and she shouldn't be fooled. Fang Feifei was so angry that she almost wanted to kill Zhu Yanqiu. Zhu Sunyang and Xiao Tong were also sent to the battlefield. They still followed the officer. The officer appointed Zhu Sunyang to be his military doctor. Obviously, he trusted Zhu Sunyang more. Zhu Sunyang's reputation was much better than Fang Feifei's, a small reporter. Every time Zhu Yanqiu heard others talking about the female military doctor on the battlefield, she felt very complicated. Once, she couldn't help but say that Zhu Sunyang was his wife. But she received disdainful looks from the people around her. The whole army knew that Zhu Yanqiu liked the war reporter. Now, she said that the military doctor on the battlefield was his wife. She was crazy. Zhu Yanqiu's behavior of being obsessed with Fang Feifei was not crazy in the eyes of others. Chapter 596. 2333, Enter the Quest, Ning Shu said to 2333. Okay. Ning Shu suddenly felt a little dizzy. When his soul and soul merged, Ning Shu opened his eyes and felt that his body was sticky. Even though there was a mat under him, he still felt very hot. The sky was a little dark. There was an oil lamp on the table. There were 4 beds in the room. Some people were sleeping on the beds, and occasionally, someone would turn over. In the middle of the night, there were occasional cicadas chirping. Ning Shu felt a little thirsty. He got up from the bed and poured a glass of water to drink from the table. The water was very cold, but it was refreshing to drink it in his mouth. It was cool. After drinking enough water, Ning Shu quickly climbed onto the bed to receive the plot. Ning Shu's identity this time was a maidservant named Miao Ling. Her master was Injin's concubine, Song Gij. For various reasons, she died in the fight in the house. Then, Ning Shu realized that this world was very chaotic. This was the Qing dynasty that had been transmigrated into a sieve. It had fallen into the magnificent 9 dragons fight for the throne. There were also princes with different temperaments. Everyone was a dragon and phoenix among men. Most of the girls were here for the 4th prince. Injin was the future emperor. He was unpredictable, suspicious, and even treacherous and cruel. All of them wanted to conquer the famous cold-faced king in history. It was too challenging to conquer such an iceberg. It melted the iceberg and watched the cold person fall into a passionate love. He was cold to others, but he was different to himself. It was too fulfilling. It was great to obtain the emperor's favor and fall in love with the emperor. They could even enter the palace and become a concubine and empress. There were transmigrators, reborn people, and even rebels in the backyard of the 4th master. There were 2 in the Neohuru clan alone. It was as if they had taken on the surname of Neohuru. They were the ones in history who had stood tall for 3 dynasties. From concubines to imperial concubines to empresses, and finally, the Empress Dowager who was raised by Qianlong. It was like a group of demons dancing wildly. All of them had their eyes on Injin as the final victor of the 9 dragons fight for the throne. Or they used their historical knowledge to help Injin fight for the throne. He felt that Injin was also quite miserable. So many people were secretly staring at him. At this time, Injin was still following behind the crown prince. He looked like he was wholeheartedly assisting the crown prince. In the end, so many women rushed into his backyard. Trial mission: protect the child in Song Shi's womb and prevent the child from dying. When Ning Shu saw this mission, he was stunned. What kind of mission is this? Ning Shu carefully sorted out the information. Madame Song's status was not very high. She was the magistrate palace maid that Master Kong had given to 4th prince. She taught Injin how to reproduce children step by step. She was Injin's first woman. Injin's virginity was given to her. Injin married Olanara of Di Fujin. Song Shi also became a Gij in the backyard. However, Injin did not like Song Shi very much. Moreover, she herself was a little confused. She always felt that she was Injin's first woman and the first woman to give birth to his child. The problem was that the Song clan's 2 daughters, the eldest daughter and the 3rd daughter, were both dead. A man's backyard was so deep. Probably only the 4th master could do it. After Ning Shu sorted out the information, he had already determined the direction of the mission in his heart. That was to protect his life and not let himself be swept by the aftermath of the battle between these women and become cannon fodder. It was already time to get up. The other 3 maids had already gotten up one after another. Ning Shu also quickly got up from the bed, picked up the clothes by the bed, and put them on. The clothes of the Manchu Qing were mainly Chongsam's. They were vertical robes with a round collar and a waistcoat on the outside. Ning Shu fumbled for a long time and finally put on the clothes. Then, he casually took a pearl flower from the small box on his bedside and inserted it into his hair bun. Then, he went to serve Gij Song, who was about to get up. Ning Shu went to the kitchen and brought warm water to Gij Song's courtyard. He walked into the room. At this time, Song Gij had just gotten up, put on her clothes, and rinsed her mouth. Ning Shu's duty was to clean Song Gij Song's face. Ning Shu wrung the handkerchief dry and gently cleaned Song Gij Song's face. He looked at Song Gij Song up close. She had a good appearance, a round face, and a full forehead. She looked like a blessed person. Otherwise, Master Kong would not have betrothed her to Injin. After cleaning Gij Song's face, he wiped her hands. Then, he carried the basin of water out of the room. Gij Song suddenly called out to Ning Shu. Ning Shu suspiciously turned his head to Song Gij Song and asked, "Gij Song, why did you call this servant? The pearl flower on your head is very beautiful." Song Gij Song said. Ning Shu was stunned. Then, he wondered if the pearl flower on his head was out of line. It should not be. Miaoling's small box should not have anything beyond her status. Thank you for Gij Song's praise. Ning Shu could only say so. Song Gij Song said again, "Don't wear it in the future. I don't like this color." Song Gij Song said as she raised her orchid fingers and stroked her temples. Ning Shu immediately took off the pearl flower on his hair bun. Song Gij Song glanced at Ning Shu and did not say anything. Ning Shu turned and left the room. In such a short time together, he roughly guessed Song Shi's character. She did not like servants to be out of her control. She said that she did not like the color of the pearl flower on her head. In fact, she did not like servants to wear beautiful clothes. She was probably afraid that her maid would seduce Injin. Song Gij Song took her personal maid to greet Di Fujin. Ning Shu went to have breakfast and then returned to the room. He put the pearl flower in the small box beside the bed and only took a silver hairpin to plug it in. For this task, Ning Shu was very careful. Song Gij Song was just a Gij Song, but her attitude toward servants was very arrogant. Therefore, as an involuntary maid, it was easy for her to become a sacrifice in the fight between big people. Moreover, part of the reason for the death of the original Miaoling was because of Song Gij Song. Sure enough, as the silver-haired man said, the most important thing was to save one's life. But he did not know whether Song Gij Song was pregnant now. The three maids in the same room returned to the room one after another. However, these three maids did not have the same master as Ning Shu, but they lived in a room with 4 people. Basically, their status was not high. When the 3 maids saw Ning Shu, they did not speak. It was not good for them to be too close to their masters. Ning Shu observed the 3 people in the same room. They were dressed very plainly and very low-key. Sure enough, the pearl flower she just wore was a bit out of place. "Miaoling, you still stay here." Gij Song fainted. "Quickly get water." A maid rushed into the room. Ning Shu anxiously said, and then hurriedly left. Ning Shu quickly went to the kitchen to prepare hot water. After getting the hot water, he went to Gij Song's courtyard. There were some people in the room. Many well-dressed women were sitting in the hall. Ning Shu squatted down with a basin of water and bowed to these women. Then, he carried the basin of water into the inner room. Song Gij Song was lying on the bed. Her face was pale. There was a doctor beside the bed who was checking her pulse. Ning Shu put down the basin of water and wiped the sweat on her face. Chapter 597. Ning Shu guessed that Song Gij was pregnant. This child was Injin's first child. It was the first child since he moved out of the palace and moved into the Fan Manor. "How is Gij Song doing?" Wulanara asked the doctor who was taking her pulse. When Wulanara asked this, the other women all looked at the doctor. Some of them had understanding on their faces, while others didn't think much of it. "Gij Song has been pregnant for a month. It's just that her body is weak, so she fainted," the doctor said. Wulanara nodded gracefully. "If you need anything, just tell me." A few women had faint jealousy on their faces. They touched their stomachs and looked at Song Shi, who was lying on the bed. Their gazes were not good. "Take good care of Gij. Gij is pregnant now. This is my first child. Nothing can go wrong." Wulanara knocked on Ning Shu's group of servants. "Yes." Wulanara left with 4th Master's group of women. The room was empty. Ning Shu wiped Song Gij's face. His gaze swept over her stomach. This child would be born safely, but it would die prematurely. Song Shi's eyelashes trembled. It looked like she was about to wake up. What's wrong with me? Song Shi touched her forehead. Her expression was a bit haggard. Ning Shu said with joy, Gij, the doctor said you're pregnant. You're already pregnant for a month. Really? Song Shi's face was filled with surprise and joy. She quickly touched her stomach. I'm pregnant. I'm pregnant with fourth master's child. Song Shi was very happy. She even gave some tips to the servant girls in her courtyard. Ning Shu also received some. Master should be leaving court at this time. Go and invite him here, Song Gij quickly said to her personal servant, Hong Mei. Her tone was filled with joy and happiness. Hong Mei bowed to Gij Song with a smile on her face, then turned around to invite the fourth master. Not long after, fourth master came over. Ning Shu stood at the side and sized up the cold-faced king in history. The most eye-catching thing was his big forehead. It was shiny, and there was a braid behind it. This style was really not good. He couldn't understand why this girl loved the Qin dynasty so much. Her hairstyle ruined her looks, and her looks ruined her forehead. Yin Zhen's expression was very indifferent. There was a hint of joy on his brows, which made people know that he was very happy in his heart. He sat by the bed and held Song Gij's hand, letting her take good care of the baby. Song Gij's expression was shy and happy. She asked Yin Zhen to stay for lunch, but Yin Zhen directly said that she wanted to eat at Fujin's place. Song Gij couldn't keep a straight face at that time. However, when Yin Zhen agreed to come over for dinner, a smile appeared on her face. When Ning Shu saw Yin Zhen leave, he didn't look as happy as before. Then, he glanced at Song Gij, who was sitting on the bed and stroking her belly with a happy look on her face. Ning Shu finally knew why Song Gij wasn't favored. When she was pregnant, she took the opportunity to seek favor. How could this last long? After Yin Zhen ascended the throne, she was still a concubine until she died. She also didn't protect her two daughters. Logically speaking, so many firsts happened to Song Gij, but Song Gij didn't grasp such an advantage at all. She didn't know when to advance or retreat. All kinds of thoughts flashed through Ning Shu's mind. The battle between the women in the harem was a battlefield without gunpowder. Pour me a glass of water, Song Gij said to Ning Shu, who was standing there like a wooden stake. Ning Shu obediently poured a glass of water for Song Gij and then stood by the bed without saying a word. People were in high spirits when they were happy. Song Gij, who was thinking about it, felt like she was about to fly into the sky. There was no need to mention the pride in her heart. This was the first child of a master. The eldest son was born from her stomach. This was the eldest son. Child, you must work hard, Song Gij touched her stomach and muttered to herself. Ning Shu, the child now might still be an embryo the size of a fingernail, but she was already given such high hopes. Ning Shu stood at the side and didn't say anything. He didn't open his mouth to flatter her. The pregnant Song Gij was very delicate. When she had lunch, she ate this tasteless and that didn't suit her appetite. In short, she didn't like any of the dishes on the table. She was all kinds of picky and asked the kitchen to make a new table. She didn't specifically say what she wanted to eat, and she wasn't satisfied with the dishes. Ning Shu's mouth twitched as he watched from the side. She was too pretentious. Even if she was pregnant, she would be tired of it again and again. It was not easy to give birth to a child safely in the backyard. At this time, she should keep a low profile. If the Song family did this, everyone in the yard would know. Even if she was delicate, she shouldn't be so delicate. Song Gij forced herself to eat a little and then cleared the table. She gave the rest of the food to the servants. Even Ning Shu got a share. Ning Shu didn't eat it. Instead, he ate the food that the servant girls should eat. At dinner, Injin came over to eat and made a table of dishes. When Injin saw these dishes, he frowned. Obviously, he was dissatisfied with the sumptuous dishes on the table. To be honest, Injin was just a bailiff who had just left the palace. His salary wasn't much. Moreover, he had such a big family to support. The two of them couldn't finish such a table of dishes. Injin was a more thrifty person. He was even more thrifty when he ascended the throne. However, Song Gij didn't notice it at all. She even eagerly picked up food for Injin. The two of them couldn't finish the table of dishes, so they gave the rest of the dishes to the servants. Then Ning Shu got another plate of dishes. Looking at the other servant girls' glory, Ning Shu was really helpless. Although the servant girls were proud of getting dishes, Ning Shu didn't feel proud at all. After Song Gij went to bed, Ning Shu returned to the room to sleep. He sat on the bed and hung his stiff legs. After standing for a whole day, his legs and stomach were stiff. After today's situation, Ning Shu also knew how to be a servant girl. In addition, she was actually a servant girl with no status. She only did some cleaning, wiping the table, and carrying water. She couldn't get a word in when she was beside Song Gij. When Ning Shu was rubbing his legs, the other three servant girls came back. When they saw Ning Shu, they said, "Your master is really troublesome. The whole bailiff mansion knows that she is pregnant. She still let the bailiff stay in her yard when she is pregnant." Ning Shu could only sigh in his heart. It was really tiring to stay in this backyard. It was such a big place. There were many people and many disputes. Moreover, they were all fighting for a man and fighting for the only resource. This task was so deceptive. She had to save the child who would have died young. How could it be possible? The Song family's child was still weak when he was born. After a while, he died young. He didn't know the meaning of this task at all. It was just an intermediate trial. It shouldn't be so simple. Don't forget that there were transmigrators and reborn people in this backyard. Moreover, he didn't know who was a transmigrator and who was reborn. One by one, they stayed in this backyard with a purpose, waiting for an opportunity to act. Chapter 598. Ning Shu washed up and prepared to go to bed. He was going to start practicing the peerless martial art. No matter what, he had to have a healthy body to be able to complete the mission. Ning Shu was glad that this peerless martial art was his and not from the system. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to practice it. Sure enough, he had to learn everything by himself. The system's things were always unpredictable. It didn't care about the life and death of others. The three maids in the same room had also fallen asleep. Ning Shu silently recited the formula of the peerless martial art. Knock, knock, knock. At this moment, there was a rhythmic knocking on the door, as if knocking on one's heart. "Oh, who's going to open the door?" "I think the masters need something," a maid said with a nasal voice. "I think the pregnant Gij Song needs something." "Whoever is the master should open the door," another maid said. Although they said so, the three maids all got up from their beds. When Ning Shu heard the knocking on the door, she felt a little irritated. She suddenly felt a little scared. "I'll go open it." Seeing that Ning Shu didn't move, one of the maids rolled her eyes at Ning Shu. She put on her shoes and flicked the wick of the oil lamp to make it brighter. Then, she went to open the door. Hearing the door open, Ning Shu looked at the door and saw that the maid who opened the door was lying on the ground. She didn't struggle, nor did she cry out in pain. She just lay there on the ground without any signs of life. Ning Shu's heart skipped a beat. He hurriedly got off the bed and ran to the door without even putting on his shoes. When he reached the door, Ning Shu immediately retreated into the room. This was because she saw a black gun barrel pointing at her. Gun. Following that, a man in a black windbreaker walked in. The corners of his clothes fluttered slightly. His whole body exuded an indifferent aura. At this moment, he was holding a gun and pointing it at Ning Shu's head. Ning Shu, Uncle. The uncle was wearing a black windbreaker. At this moment, the outside of the house was pitch black, which made him look like a ghost, incomparably cold. With the black muzzle pointed at him, Ning Shu felt goosebumps all over his body. Even his soul was trembling, as if he was facing something extremely terrifying. Ning Shu's face trembled and cold sweat appeared on his forehead. With his head pointed at, Ning Shu found it difficult to even speak. It was like a frog that had been targeted by a poisonous snake, facing its natural enemy. Ning Shu raised his hands in surrender. This is the Qin dynasty, and it is against the law for you to be so willful. Ning Shu dared to guarantee that if he moved, he would be killed immediately. The school doctor adjusted his glasses and raised his eyebrows at Ning Shu. Mid-level taskmaster. Although it was a question, his tone was very calm and even indifferent. The school doctor moved his gun away from Ning Shu's head and aimed it at the other two maids in the room. Please, let me go. I will leave this world immediately. I was wrong. One of the maids knelt on the ground and kowtowed to the school doctor. She looked regretful, tears and snot covering her face. Ning Shu, dumbfounded, the school doctor raised his eyebrows and said, "Okay. Thank you." The maid cried and laughed, but the next second, her expression froze. Her body fell to the ground. There were no wounds on her body, but she was no longer breathing. Ning Shu didn't hear the gunshot at all. He turned his stiff neck and looked at the maid on the ground. When he turned his head and saw the school doctor looking at him, Ning Shu was so scared that he peed his pants. Your turn. The uncle pulled the trigger on the other maidservant who was hugging the quilt and shivering. The maidservant died without any resistance. Ning Shu's forehead was sweating profusely. All the muscles on her body were trembling. When the uncle looked at her, Ning Shu's face twitched even more. Ning Shu still had a dumbfounded expression on her face. When she saw the uncle's windbreaker move slightly, Ning Shu shouted 2333 in her heart. What's the situation now? I met a freak. Ning Shu shouted, what should I do now? Let's run. 2333 squeezed out the words. The uncle was scarier than before. Ning Shu slowly moved to the door. She couldn't be killed. What would happen to her mission if she died? If she died, she would have to start all over again. If she wanted to become an intermediate taskmaster again, she would need to double the points. It wasn't easy to become an intermediate taskmaster. This mission had to be completed no matter what. Who was the uncle? The school doctor turned his head to look at Ning Shu and said indifferently, they've all been wiped out. You're the only one standing here all alone. It's quite uncomfortable to look at you. Ning Shu, the uncle's obsessive-compulsive disorder was hopeless. He killed 3 and left 1 alone. Why not kill them all? Damn it. She was just sitting at home. Disaster fell from the sky. I don't know anything. Can you let me go? Ning Shu said. The uncle glanced at Ning Shu. He adjusted his glasses and scanned the room. Ning Shu asked, which bed is yours? What? Ning Shu stared at the school doctor. What did you say? He must want you to give yourself to him. That's why he asked you which bed you sleep on. 2333's voice sounded in Ning Shu's head. The school doctor curled his lips. A cold light flashed through his glasses, making him look very creepy. Especially when he stood in the room with his long legs, the room seemed a lot shorter. Ning Shu had a feeling that the uncle had heard 2333's words. The curve of his lips was so creepy. Ning Shu quickly pointed at a bed. I'll sleep here. Shake the dust off the bed. The uncle said indifferently. Ning Shu, what was he doing? Under the uncle's gaze, Ning Shu bent down and brushed the dust off the bed. The school doctor took a few steps back and looked at Ning Shu, who was tidying the bed indifferently. Okay, okay. Ning Shu said to the uncle who was playing with the gun. Only then did the uncle sit down. He crossed his legs, which made his legs look very long. Ning Shu wanted to sit down and get closer to the uncle. The school doctor turned around and looked at Ning Shu. Stay away from me. Ning Shu was speechless. Ning Shu's butt was almost touching the bed. He stood up awkwardly and said, "Do you want some tea? I'll boil some water for you." The school doctor looked at Ning Shu indifferently and didn't say anything. Ning Shu tentatively took 2 steps toward the door. Seeing that the school doctor didn't point the gun at her, she immediately ran out of the room. Help! Ning Shu ran all the way to the kitchen and locked the door. He leaned against the door and panted. He didn't dare to go back in. He might be killed if he went back. Ning Shu also didn't know why the uncle wanted to kill the mission enforcers. Chapter 599. Ning Shu hammered her weak legs and asked 2333, "What's going on?" "It's just like what you saw. The other 3 were also mission enforcers, but they've been killed," 2333 said. What was the probability of 4 mission enforcers in a room? And Ning Shu didn't realize that they were mission enforcers at all. It was probably because she didn't know them well enough. Why were they killed? Why did Uncle kill them? Ning Shu was very confused. 2333 asked, "Why did you call him Uncle?" "That's not the point. The point is, what's the situation now? Am I going to be killed too?" Ning Shu wiped the cold sweat on her forehead. Those mission enforcers should be high-level mission enforcers. This is a trial mission for intermediate mission enforcers. They shouldn't be here to cause trouble. 2333 said, "Otherwise, I can't think of any other reason." Ning Shu smacked her lips. "You killed high-level mission enforcers just like that." It wasn't easy to become a high-level mission enforcer. She was only an intermediate mission enforcer, but she already felt that it was very, very difficult. They said there was a lack of mission enforcers, but they didn't hesitate to kill them. They're just high-level mission enforcers. They violated the rules set by the higher-ups. They don't have the ability to jump out of the rules. If they jump out of the rules, they'll die. High-level mission enforcers are just ants, slightly bigger ants, slightly stronger ants. 2333's voice was cold. Ning Shu's heart was cold. Why would high-level mission enforcers come to an intermediate trial mission? There must be a benefit. You'll know the benefit later. And this benefit can make these high-level mission enforcers risk being killed to enter the trial mission. If not kill them, who would be killed? 2333 said without much care. Ning Shu was even more speechless. She felt that she was unjustly implicated. But seeing 3 high-level mission enforcers die in front of her, Ning Shu's heart trembled. Her heart felt like it was soaked in ice water. Why was the world so dangerous? Missions were dangerous, and there were stronger people who could kill her in one move. People's hearts were not what they used to be, and the world was difficult. Ning Shu stayed in the kitchen and didn't dare to go back. He didn't know if the school doctor would kill everyone because of his obsessive-compulsive disorder. He didn't dare to take the risk. She was an honest, middle-level mission enforcer. She couldn't let the uncle kill her by mistake. Every time Ning Shu made a step forward, he would discover that there was someone even better than him. It was so tiring. The fact that the school doctor could kill a mission enforcer meant that he had a very high status. How could he have met him in a low-level dimension before? Ning Shu, I don't dare to go back. Ning Shu felt a little hungry. He found some cold pastries in the kitchen and ate 2 pieces. He choked and burped, then stopped eating. After staying in the kitchen for a long time, Ning Shu decided to go back to see if he had left. He couldn't play with this kind of people. Ning Shu carefully peeked into the room through the window. The school doctor who was supposed to be sitting on the bed was gone, and the person who had been killed earlier had come back to life and was walking around the room. Are these the souls of the original owner? Ning Shu asked. 2333 nodded. Ning Shu let out a sigh of relief. He walked into the room. The three maids saw Ning Shu and asked, "Where did you go in the middle of the night? Don't tell me you went to meet someone in private." Another maid said with a look of disdain. Ning Shu didn't say anything. He lay on the bed and felt that the school doctor had sat on the bed. It was cold, and the hair on his body stood on end. His mind was full of the black windbreaker. The mirror reflected the cold white light. The abstinence and coldness. I'm so scared. Ning Shu didn't sleep well that night. When he woke up the next morning, his head hurt. Especially when he saw the three maids walking around in front of him, Ning Shu thought of the mission enforcers who had been in their bodies and disappeared. He felt cold all over. He felt that the world was full of danger. Ning Shu felt a little dispirited. He was really scared last night. He asked 2333, "I suddenly feel that there's no meaning." "What meaning do you have?" 2333 asked back. "There's a price to pay for everything. Mortals, you want to live forever, but you can't do it. Some people want to live forever, to be strong enough to control their own destiny. There's no such thing as a free lunch in this world. You're scared because you're not strong enough." 2333 said, "If you want to give up, I can remove the binding between us." "What will happen to me if I remove the binding?" Ning Shu asked. 2333 paused after every word, "You'll be erased. Even your soul will cease to exist. From then on, Ning Shu will disappear. You won't exist in any world. The heavenly axiom has no information about you." Ning Shu laughed dryly, "I was just joking. I just wanted to liven up the atmosphere. A quest taker is a path of no return. If you quit halfway, you will be erased. You can only climb higher. As long as you are not erased or die in the quest, you will never die." 2333 asked Ning Shu again, "Do you want to give up?" 2333's voice was very cold. Ning Shu took a deep breath and said, "When did I say that I was going to give up? I just sighed and you kept blabbering on and on." 2333 was trying to scare her. Ning Shu washed up and went to serve Gij Song. When he arrived at Gij Song's courtyard, he found that Song Gij Song was still asleep. But soon, it would be time for Song Gij Song to greet Di Fujin. Could it be that Song Gij did not intend to pay respects to Di Fujin? Was she going to use her pregnancy as an excuse to not greet Di Fujin? Ning Shu stood at the door with a basin of water. After waiting for a long time, it was getting late. He was sure that Song Gij Song didn't intend to not greet Di Fujin. It was only the first month of pregnancy. She didn't have any trouble moving. Song Gij Song was just a concubine. It was easy for problems to arise if she was spoiled. Encountering such a muddle-headed master was also a bit difficult. With a creak, the door opened. Song Gij's personal maidservant, Hong Mei, came out. She glanced at Ning Shu, took over the basin in Ning Shu's hand, and cast a sidelong glance at Ning Shu. She raised her chin and said, "Go to Di Fujin's courtyard and tell her that Gij is not feeling well today. She felt dizzy when she woke up this morning. Go and apologize to Di Fujin, and tell her that Gij can't pay her respects today." Ning Shu, T_T, I'll cry and flip table, he definitely couldn't do something like being cannon fodder. Big sister Hongmei, this servant still needs to help Gij freshen up. How can it be this servant's turn to show her face in front of a noble? Ning Shu said cautiously. Hongmei raised her chin, "At least you know what's good for you. Go and report to Di Fujin's courtyard." Go quickly, or Di Fujin will blame Gij Song. Hong Mei carried the basin of water into the room. Chapter 600. Ning Shu felt depressed. It was hard to be assigned such a task, and he had to go. Ning Shu went to Di Fujin's courtyard. Led by a maid, he entered the hall. As soon as he walked in, he saw a few beautiful women sitting in the room. Olanara sat at the head of the table. She looked elegant and dignified. Ning Shu walked quickly into the hall. He bowed to Olanara and said respectfully, "Greetings to Di Fujin." Before Di Fujin could say anything, a woman sitting below said, "Why hasn't your Gij come to greet Fujin yet?" Ning Shu looked at the concubine who spoke. It was Injin's concubine, Gung. He bowed and said, "Gij Gung, my Gij didn't get up in the morning. Gij felt uneasy and asked me to come and apologize to Fujin." Ning Shu said again and again. When he bowed, he was almost half squatting. His attitude was very respectful and humble. Olanara smiled faintly and said, "It's okay. Since Gij Song isn't feeling well, have you found a doctor?" Ning Shu quickly said, "Gij said to just bear with it. There's no need to make a big fuss. She can't do anything beyond her status." Olanara had a smile on her face. It was hard to tell if she was angry or not. She told Ning Shu, "Take good care of your Gij. If you need anything, tell me." "Thank you for your grace, Fujin," Ning Shu said respectfully. Olanara asked Ning Shu to leave. Ning Shu walked out of the courtyard and sighed heavily. Oh, it was too scary. He was afraid she would be killed as an example to others. He felt like he had walked on the edge of life and death. Ning Shu observed the women in the room. Injin's Di Fujin, Olanara, was noble and elegant. His Di Fujin, Nyen Sherlan, was beautiful and weak. She had the gentle temperament of a Han woman. Nyen gave birth to 3 sons and a daughter, but all of them died young. There was also Gij's Neohuru clan and a small Neohuru clan. Speaking of which, there were very few children of Injin who lived to adulthood. Compared to his father, Master Kong, he really had very few children. Ning Shu returned to Song Gij's courtyard and saw that Song Gij was already sitting at the dining table, eating. The table was full of food, and it was so sumptuous in the morning. Ning Shu felt quite powerless. He walked in and bowed. Gij Song drank a mouthful of rice porridge and wiped the corners of her mouth with a handkerchief. Ning Shu asked, "What did Fujin say?" Ning Shu said, "Fujin didn't say anything. He just told Gij to take good care of her body." A smile appeared on Gij Song's face. She looked very satisfied. She said to her personal maid, "Hongmei, give her my hairpin." Hongmei looked unhappy. In the end, she went into the inner room and took the hairpin to Ning Shu. This hairpin was made of jade, and there were some black spots on it. It was not very valuable, but it was a great reward for a maid like her. Ning Shu quickly waved her hand and said, "This is too valuable. I can't accept it. Take it." Gij Song was very satisfied when she saw Ning Shu's fearful look. Hongmei carried Gij Song and stuffed the hairpin into Ning Shu's hand. She gritted her teeth and said, "Gij gave it to you. Take it." Ning Shu took the hairpin. Seeing that Hongmei's eyes were fixed on the hairpin in her hand, Ning Shu sighed in her heart. After that, Ning Shu gave the hairpin to Hongmei. It was not worth it to hold a grudge for such a worthless hairpin. Hongmei politely declined it at first, and then slightly raised her chin to accept the hairpin. Sure enough, like master, like servant. Hongmei and Song Gij Song were the same. Once they were in power, they became complacent. She would rather be a low-key servant. Song Gij Song's pregnancy was not very comfortable. It was either there was something wrong with her or there was something wrong with her. Anyway, there was no end to it. A woman's pregnancy was uncomfortable, but it was not like Song Gij Song. Meowing, go and ask Master Baylor to come. Gij Song is not feeling well, Hongmei said to Ning Shu. Ning Shu glanced at Song Gij Song, who was sitting on the bed. Song Gij Song rubbed her forehead with her hand, looking very uncomfortable. With Ning Shu's shallow medical skills, Gij Song was not feeling well yet. After a while, it would be the pregnancy period, and she would vomit. Gij Song should take good care of her body now. She should eat more before she starts vomiting. When the time came, it would be very painful. Go and ask Master Baylor to come over. Gij Song is not feeling well, Hongmei urged again when she saw that Ning Shu did not move. Ning Shu was speechless. Why did she always have to do such things? Besides, Injin was not a doctor. Why did she call him over? Being pampered like this would always wear out Injin's patience and pity. Go quickly. What are you standing there for? Can't you see that Gij Song is not feeling well? Hongmei's face was already stern. Ning Shu said yes and turned around to look for Injin. No, he should be looking for a doctor. Ning Shu did not go to look for Injin at all. Instead, he went to inform Di Fujin that Song Gij Song was not feeling well. He should look for the main wife for such a matter in the backyard. Directly bypassing Di Fujin to look for Injin was simply challenging Ulanara's authority and status. When Ulanara heard that Song Gij Song was not feeling well, she asked Ning Shu to directly invite the doctor in the mansion. Ning Shu invited the doctor and came back to Gij Song and said, Gij, Master Baylor has something to do and can't come. However, when he heard that Gij Song is not feeling well, he was very anxious and quickly asked me to invite the doctor over. Song Gij Song first saw that Ning Shu did not invite the doctor over, and her expression immediately turned ugly. When she heard Ning Shu's words, she reluctantly accepted it and let the doctor take her pulse. Gij Song is fine. She is a little uncomfortable during pregnancy. Gij Song, pay attention to maintain a good mood. The doctor took her pulse and left. He did not even prescribe a prescription. It meant that nothing happened. Ning Shu felt very tired. During dinner, Injin came to visit Song Gij Song and asked, How are you? Master, I'm much better. Song Gij Song was a little flattered and said. She clearly felt that her master's attitude towards her was much better today. He was more gentle than usual. Song Gij Song could only attribute it to her being pregnant. Her master treated her well. Injin said to Song Shi, You are a sensible person. Injin was praising Song Shi for not looking for him directly today. Instead, she went to look for Di Fujin. Song Gij Song was a little confused, but she felt a little tenderness from Injin. She was overjoyed and did not think about the meaning of Injin's words. After dinner, Injin planned to leave, but Song Shi asked him to stay. Injin frowned and asked Song Shi to take good care of the fetus. Then, he left. Song Gij Song was a little confused. Her master was fine before, but why did she feel that he was cold again? Ning Shu watched from the side and didn't know what to say. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.